I've got a Twitter feed somewhere else where I can, if other people want to talk about it, they can do so. I'll see whether or not we're live. I will type on my little screen here. Bing. Okay. We'll move on. There we go. Anyway, I'll tell you that, boy, I was just chomping at the bit. Bring up issues about what he was talking about in terms of the resurrection. So just as a reprise, you and Belligerent Christian were thrashing over the validity of the resurrection. And boy, this was like, oh, we're going to hear the same arguments over and over again stuff, because there's only one argument to make. It's the classic Christian one. It's that, gee, these guys wouldn't lie about that. It must be true.
That was
and if that's the only alternative, you're stuck. But the other alternative is that people honestly believed something to be true and then told others about it. And
Preach,
given
brother.
the speed in which...
I said, preach, brother.
Yeah, preach, brother. When you look at the dynamics of religion systems and political systems and the growth of it, from my mind, I find it really unlikely that Christianity could have spread if you had a bunch of people that got together in a room over the coffee or the beer or whatever it is they were doing and said, hey, let's invent a religion.
Yeah.
And no, this is just twaddle. So my model is that there must have been an event that occurred, inspired a core of them to be convinced that they had seen the risen Christ. And remember, he'd been crucified, and so poof, was off the scope. They've suddenly are up the creek. And Gunnar, in the little character Gunnar, in the chat room, had come up with the same idea I did. It's the fact of the matter, for me, the most intriguing blip in the data stream. Well, let me give a swing in about Roswell, because this is exactly the analogy that I'm using. There's a wonderful analysis that was done by the Air Force about 15 years ago, maybe, and it's all available free. And needless to say, the UFO nuts just went berserk over it, where they went through and analyzed all the available data on the stuff. And one of the most interesting finds about this was the one where the guy who worked at the mortuary claimed he had seen the little body bags with the little alien bodies in them. And wow, I mean, that is really suspicious, isn't it? And here was an eye. Would you say this guy was lying or was he telling the truth? Well, he had a real experience remembered. And the clue had to do with the things buried in his stories. He happened to say two things about the bodies. One is he remembered the red-headed captain, a guy that was major that ran the Air Force Base. Remembered seeing black Air Force officers. Sorry, that's not 1947. Oh, we got another person in, and this is who we got in here. Oh, AmazeNet, somebody else altogether. Hello, AmazeNet.
Hello.
Hello. This is my very first live broadcast where I am talking with other people live electronically on the interweb. Oh, isn't that exciting?
It is my first time joining you, and I'm on the wrong account.
Oh, hey, Peter.
Oh, oh, you are? Oh, well, then you are. You may say goodbye then, unless you want to hear us talk about the implausibility of the Christian resurrection.
Well, after today, Chris might think I'm a dog anyway, so let that picture stick for this.
He looks like a lycanthrope to me, Buster.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Jackson being into animals, maybe Jackson likes that better than my normal Einstein picture.
Okay. So you are the Einstein guy. Okay, thank you. I was hoping that you would come in. Yeah, because you came up under a different screen name. Because you and you apparently also noted that peculiar detail about the fact that they didn't recognize Jesus in the very first resurrection incident in the Gospels.
To me, it seems the most plausible explanation. They didn't recognize him, so wasn't that maybe just a lookalike, and maybe just the fact that they wanted to see him rise because that
Well,
was
for me,
in the prophecy.
for me, the obvious thing is that whole missing context of his family. Oh, I was just going to finish the Roswell story because it's too juicy to pass up, because it goes to the core of what I'm trying to use as an analogy in the other case, is that in the Roswell incident, you had this guy who claimed to have seen the little bodies that were brought in body bags of the aliens. And in the analysis that was done fairly recently, there were bits of accurate information in there that gave the clue as to what actually happened, because the guy explicitly had remembered that there was a red-headed major that ran the Air Force Base, or colonel or whatever, and that there was black Air Force officers. Well, that can't possibly be 1947. It's still a segregated Air Force in 1947. And there was no red-headed guy. However, in 1959, there was a famous B-52 crash where the flames burned up the bodies so bad that they were put, their little shriveled remains were put in body bags. They were carried to Roswell, brought through the mortuary. And at that time, there was a red-headed guy that ran the base, and there were black Air Force officers. So what was extremely likely is the man, years after the fact, after there had been so much hype going on, this was like 1980s and 90s, as opposed to the 1940s when the event took place and the 1959 when the other one took place. So it's several decades afterwards. But now there was a selection pressure for him to have his brain reallocate this and connect it up with the thing with the person coming in to interview him, because now he's getting noticed because he supposedly saw the bodies that were brought in under the Roswell thing, when in fact he saw real events. An actual thing occurred. Verified. Now, let's jump back then to Jesus' time. What's fascinating is we know, as I recall, James was Jesus's brother. We've got the mom. We don't know what the hell happened to Joseph and all the family, but presumably there's an extended family that's invisible in the Gospels. What the hell were they doing? How many of them were paying attention to what brother Jesus was doing? He was getting into with the Romans and so forth and so on. And so I hypothesize, if one of his brothers came to visit after the crucifixion to commiserate, see how they were doing. You know, I know they were really taking this stuff really seriously, and I needed to see him. And he's very circumspect about it. And at some point, somebody there in some context suddenly gets it in their burr in their bonnet that that's actually the risen Jesus. And he doesn't have the heart to tell him that he's wrong. He just kind of goes with the flow. He doesn't realize he's setting in motion, ultimately, a gigantic religion because of the experience that he has. That's why they didn't recognize him at first. We don't know what philosophy the brothers had. We didn't know how deeply religious they were in other contexts, how devout a Jew he was. We don't know anything. We only know the version that's put down in the finished Gospels that got officially sanctioned by the church at the time of the Roman Empire, when it became an official religion. That's right. Way far down the road. If we had primary sources on this, we could decide whether this is a cockamamie theory or not. If we had the thing next door saying, you know, I was cleaning the pots and this damn Jesus guy came by and he was showing everybody the holes in his hands, and he was just, it creeped me out. I went back to my pots. I don't want to hear anything about the neighbors anymore. That's the kind of fascinating story that would jaw drop, but we don't have that. I couldn't help resisting bringing up Origen and Celsus, because Celsus is one of the famous critics of Christianity. This, again, is way down the road. This is centuries down the road. But we don't know directly one word of Celsus. We only know the cribs that Origen copied from him. And so was he accurate? And that's why I brought up Hank Hanegraaff. Are you familiar? Oh, Psy Strike is joining live on YouTube. Is he coming in? Yay! Wait a minute. Who's up? You switched over to the other. Got a thing. I better zap over here and give him a notice to see if he isn't already popping in here. Not sure whether or not this is even time. Wow. Yes. tell, I'll put a note in for Cy to tell everybody about it.
I just switched accounts, so.
Okay, yes, I now see your
I'll
mug, your little Einstein there. It takes a while for the thing to pop up here and share the link. I'm showing that I'm actually doing this crap live. Anyway, the neat thing about this whole provenance is when you look at stuff in the chronological order, where you have data stream and where you don't. And it's clear that poor, tweeted it out, great, excellent. Belligerent Christian can't even realize that Tacitus and Josephus are not contemporaries. They're way down the road. And I was trying to remind him, forget that. We have the Nero situation to account for. We know that by the time of Nero in the 60s, active Christian community, big enough that there's enough of them in Rome that they're getting burned in the amphitheater after the fire. So we don't have to hypothesize this. To my mind, I don't have the slightest doubt that there was actually a Matthew and a Mark and a Luke and a John and a Peter and all the rest, and that these people together constructed together a working religion structure. Very much probably oriented just to Jews. Remember, Paul comes in with his epiphany on the road to Damascus, our epileptic guy. What kind of seizures he might have had, what kind of we know that the people have gotten religion through epileptic seizures. There's a paper I didn't put in the little Twitter feed on that.
I had actually, I thought it was funny you mentioned that because I have heard that before. I read
on this where people will go into religious ecstasy on, and there's another factor to bear in mind. This is the hilarious part. Who can make this up? The brain system that kicks in when people go into religious ecstasy, and it's true for Japanese monks and Christian nuns and dervishes whirling and fill in the blank, system that our brain uses that lights up during sexual arousal. No wonder this is never going to go away. It really does make you feel really good. A bunch of dynamic figures going on in here. Anyway, because we can discount the appearance in front of the multitude and that stuff, there's every reason to think that that's a later interpolation. We've got a few instances of where incident, and then the rest seem to be miraculous. We don't know what the hell was going on when they heard the speaking in tongues. We don't know what the other circumstances are going on. By the time you get to Paul, who never met Jesus in his life, knew him secondhand, believe he's got a personal relationship with him because of the thing on the road to Damascus when he hears his voice, and he's best buds from that point on. Well, we don't need to actually have Jesus being real to account for that, because that's precisely the kind of dynamic we get into with followers of Muhammad, with followers of Joseph Smith. You look at the guy that really made the Mormon church was Brigham Young, who turned it into a going concern. So you can see the social dynamics. I shall pause for breath now and let somebody come in with a comment.
Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to address Tacitus, because one thing that we can't seem to convince Chris of is that the fact that Tacitus reports Christians, that says nothing whether or not there even was a Christ. So I don't think where he gets that leap.
Well, he does, but I'll tell you, I confess to being I was about to tweet this in the comments section, but since the show was kind of wrapping up and I had to put my clothes on and that, because you really don't want to see me in my jammies when I'm doing live feed, I can tell you that. Anyway,
I'm in my jammies.
Oh, but you have very well. Actually, there was nothing wrong with it. I tend to stay in my light pajama things in here because it's like 90 degrees here in Spokane, and I don't have air conditioning. So, although let me turn on my fan to make sure if it proves to be noisy, it'll be a problem. If it's not a noise, then
I mean, I couldn't hear it last time you had it on.
Okay, good then, because that gives a little bit of air circulation. I can hear it rumbling from here, but the microphone I think is a bit more directional, so it really doesn't impact on that. But anyway, the Bart Ehrman camp, not the Richard Carrier camp. For me as a historian, same reason I think that there was a real Homer. We have to remember that the whole higher criticism movement in Germany in the 19th century was aimed initially at Homer. There's no Homer, he was just fictional, and that all of this stuff came up independently. Then they said, oh, we'll look at Christianity too, and started to pull apart the Yahwist and priestly accounts and all that kind of stuff. But I think today we've started to swing back in that people do things, and ideas don't come out of some ether. They are done by human beings. You don't have to believe that Joseph Smith is fictional to see that Mormonism was real and that millions of people can believe something that's cockamamie wrong. And so we don't have to fictionalize Joseph Smith. It doesn't justify or explain away the flapdoodle that's in the Book of Mormon. So the Book of Mormon is actually my poster child for, oh yes, millions of people can be devout, decent, upstanding people with a great choir and drink a lot of orange juice, but they believe something that's just nonsense. Why can't that apply in the earlier era?
Because it's different. We couldn't see that then, but we know what's wrong with Mormonism because it's not us. It's somebody else, so we can criticize them.
It's ironic that it popped up when I was writing the Paralogues of Phileas Fogg, because in Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days, there's only 2 examples of religion and a kind of a side third. There's a card-playing preacher that's going to his mission in India that's on the Mongolia, and he doesn't even get a name. And then there is a profanation of the Malabar Hill Temple by Passepartout, where he gets mugged by the priest because he walks in there and they take his shoes off, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And it plays a part in the plot in the novel because it's fogged down because the British protect local religion, and so he's actually breaking British law to profane a Hindu temple under British law under the Raj. But the American train, there is a whole bloody chapter on the damn Mormon church. No role in the plot at all. It's a complete digression. It just goes on and on. It's like him describing the fish in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that's swimming by the window. It's like boring you to tears. Why did he put this in the tale at all? Is it that weird that he was curious about it? And my working hypothesis is religious. And he wanted to thumb his nose at religion, but you do it the same way that William Clifford, the British mathematician, did, which you talk about other people's religions. Oh, here's a silly religion that believes in a resurrection myth. Oh, I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm talking about this other one. But everybody in the 19th century knew exactly what he was analogizing. And I'm inclined to think Malabar Hill Hindu incident and the Mormon incident, because those are all religions of the other. They're not Christianity, but they're stupid. And so you can look at them and go, boy, this is silly. And then maybe you might start thinking about other silly. Or a belligerent Christian. And he didn't sound that belligerent. Dull as a sack of
he
hammer.
never does to me, at least.
Yeah. But he is a young earth creationist?
Yeah, we had our first conversation was on biology, and his whole hang up was that you can't, it's like the mutation rate wasn't fast enough to produce enough nucleotides from like our earliest ancestors to today. And so eventually
he flushed baraminology down the drain because he's got way more problems.
No, I actually had to kind of explain what that was. I was like, what do you think of baraminology? And he's like, baraminology, I was like, the idea of kinds and that stuff. And he was like,
he doesn't read his own stuff. Oh my! But he does think the Earth is 6,000 years old and there was a flood.
It's very hard to pin him down.
He doesn't really. He doesn't really care about the flood per se. I think he's content to kind of let that go.
Yeah, there are a lot of Christians I know that are like that. They say, yes, there was a flood, and you ask them when, and they go, I don't care. They're a lot like that. So, in fact, I will adjust my notes accordingly, that I will not list him as a young earth creationist, because we don't know what he is. Well, I'll put a little question mark.
I asked him, he is.
Yeah.
He is earth creationist.
I just
At
don't know
least-
all the ins and outs of his beliefs.
Because you do have old Earth creationists. You find the origins or bust argument can be made by intelligent designers, and do. So there's a lot of squishy things. I want to ideally focus in so that when people use the word creationist, they're talking young Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Is the rest. And so, because that's how it basically skivvies out. You, Ross, and the old Earth creationists dynamically are in the same, we're okay with the number of zeros in the Earth and universe thing that the intelligent designers are. Young Earth creationists are the ones that quibble on that. So by pigeonholing them into which camp they're on, that allows you to target, and you can often figure out where they're coming from. As you've already demonstrated, Jackson, the guy never heard of baraminology. There were a lot of subjects that came up that he didn't seem to know much about and have the curiosity.
Yeah, I think as I've talked to some Christians before, and for a lot of them, it's not about the science. Science is a secondary issue. It's the resurrection first, origin second kind of thing. Is kind of a way they've put it to me, at least.
Footnotes. Yeah, well, and that to me doesn't surprise me at all, because after all, it's an evangelical religion. From their point of view, the most important thing they can ever do in their life is to bring somebody to Jesus, because you have now been saved and you're going to have an eternal happiness up in heaven, although you may not get your dog, but nevertheless, you've got that wonderful thing. And that's the whole Megillah. In the same way that Islam has their own imperative, it's to follow the book, because this is the operating manual, the Quran. And therefore, it's not merely that you follow Allah, but here's the exact, you have to follow to the letter. If you don't, you're screw up. And needless to say, that has caused a certain amount of trouble in the modern world as people disagree over what it is they're supposed to be doing according to the utterly clear operating manual. But we'll leave Quran to another day. So the thing is that if you, I attended a debate over in Seattle just earlier in the year with a McGavie or something like that. He's a young atheist who was just popping up in the field, and he was debating a local Christian apologist. And again, it was one of these cases where it was the Christian wanting to debate, and they had to scavenge around to find an atheist to debate them. And I would have gone, me. I would have been happy. A fairly.
Oh, you would have wiped the floor with this guy.
I'd like to see if I can. I'm certainly not going to be sandbagged on stuff. And what bothered me about McAvie's argument, because I'd have to check my bibliography to find out things. He's about your age. He's in his early 20s. And he's a bright, articulate guy, but he doesn't necessarily know as much about the history of things, or for that matter, the ins and outs of the apologetic frame. You build up occasionally, when your opponent that has a mess of shit piling out, that this is an opportunity to pull a rug out from under them. And it's always fun. Please heel of the resurrection argument is not think about how people can believe things that aren't true. Thank you for bringing up Fatima. Literally starting to type about, the miracle of Fatima, at the same time that you were coming up with the thing.
Yeah, it just.
How about your public chat? I'm trying to. I got to remember. I got to here. There we go. And I want to pop out the chat. Yipes. Good. Well, at least I've got that part. I can see it over here. We'll see if anybody pops up on that. I'm still very new at this. This is literally
RJ, just popping in. Do you have a link to this stream? Because I have been looking and I can't find it. I didn't see Jack.
To this stream. Yeah, the one that I'll copy that up here so you can send it to everybody else. Blippity bloop, bloppity bloop. At least I can do the bloody. There we go. Ta-da! Far and wide. We got 4 viewers so far, so there's somebody else paying attention. We have 5 there for a while. And if there's any Christians that want to come in and thrash it over with us, good heavens, come on in. We can have a chat about this.
That didn't work. I couldn't copy it. It disappeared.
Oh, wow.
Can you put it in a tweet
no,
so I can retweet it?
That's the Hangout.
Are you seeing the group chat?
Yeah, that's
No.
that's the hangout that we're in.
Go up to the little. Oh, I'm channeling Strike here. Go up to the upper left-hand corner when the little pop-up menu comes out, and there's the little blue box up in the corner with the little lines on it, like a blue piece of paper.
Yeah, that's the hangout we're in.
Oh,
Yes,
that's not what I see it on mine.
Well, what I meant was the video that is actually
The
now
YouTube
showing.
video.
I'm not sure if you want to invite everyone
Jack will have
on
to do
Twitter
that.
to join. Because
You might want to delete that. You don't want people to
Yeah,
see.
I'll stick my hangout still up here again that I got with Strike. Advised me, at least initially, not to do things in the regular Twitter feed because everybody and his brother is going to come in there and it might crash the system and so forth. I'm actually
and that was the link that you just gave me. That wasn't
that's us.
what I was asking for.
So you
I
wanted
was
the link
asking for the vid
Jackson's
The
link
YouTube
to
link.
the stream. The YouTube link.
to my
yes.
my general channel.
No, to this where this video is happening live on YouTube.
Oh wow! Oh gosh! Oh, now I get a grip on what's going on. Yeah, I think
Your channel is fine too. Your channel is fine too. I'll get the video from there. That's not a problem.
Oh well, then that I can get that to you in just a jiffy. Let's see. I'm all very new as to what I'm an idiot. I want things to be intuitively obvious. So when I am on the, I am everywhere, a universal thing like Lucy in the little movie. Okay, where am I? Whoops, I opened up the wrong one. I need to get the video. I keep all these damn addresses on in here. We had a terrible trouble getting the whole system going up. My YouTube channel was under an AOL, but my other channel was under this Tortugan Jim Gmail account, and it didn't recognize one as the other. Excuse me, there's one me. Why can't it all notice? Okay, I'm just typing my YouTube page in, and we will put
Okay.
over to this window, over there, blah, 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 blah. There we go. Let's try this one. Enter.
Your channel is fine too.
Yeah, I'm just doing that now. This should be, and I'll do the same thing over on the Twitter feed. Play on stuff because it's handling a bunch of things at a time.
I'll get.
There we go. Okay. That far and wide, people can get onto the thing. Hopefully, it'll be showing up on my live feed. Cy was browbeating me for this onto your channel. There's the Pug. Hi, Pug.
Hello.
Are you home from work or are you somewhere else? Yeah, that's right. It's 5:30 up there. I'm all very new as to what I want things to be intuitively obvious. So when I'm getting double feed here. This off.
I think that's
there we go. Oh, I see. There we go. I suddenly realized I'm over in another area entirely. So let me pop out the damn chat. Pop out chat. Now I know what I'm doing. I'm kind of up to speed now. Sort of, kind of. Okay. We had just been discussing, I got the pop-out chat out now so I can see what that is. We got 6 viewers. Okay. I'm hearing sounds from people. Let's do a sound check from everybody now that I'm adjusting.
Buster the Pug checking in.
Paul. Yeah, I see Apologies on there. Johnny Drive-By, can't post it, a bunch of things. You kids will have to work that one out. Yeah, we were just thrashing over the epistemology of early Christianity and the resurrection. It's basically their slam dunk. It's, in their view, it's their origins or bust.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get over the hurdle of the resurrection, then everything else is irrelevant. And that's why it's from a logical, analytical point of view. The point is you go, if you're going to argue that the early apostles were just a bunch of raving, hallucinating lunatics, then you've got to figure out why they had the reaction on people that they did. Something in between bald-faced liar and hallucinating lunatics. And that's why I really do, my working hypothesis is the same one that our little Einstein Gunna guy came up with. One of the brothers came by and visited Jesus's family bunch, his new bunch, after the crucifixion, and he got mistaken for the risen Jesus. We don't know. As a dramatist, I can imagine a context in which that would have been effortless. And once you get that seed planted in their head, endorphins swooping into their brain, when suddenly the person they didn't recognize to begin with, one of them suddenly decides it's Jesus. Won't tell them no. He feels how happy they are that they were so downcast after the crucifixion, and he just doesn't have the heart to break the magic. He's only going to be staying there a while. He says some boilerplate platitudes. We don't know what religion, faith the other guy had. We can assume he was an Orthodox Jew or one of the various sects. We don't know. And that's always fascinating. Why don't we know anything at all? Attitudes, family life, background history of any of the brothers and sisters. Did he have sisters? Who all was in the family? We've got this big hole that the people that finally wrote the finished text of the Bible squat about. And as a historian, I'm going, wait a minute, that could be the whole tale there. So we're missing that internal context that basically is from life, which I suspect runs from 6 AD to AD 36. I take the view that Luke probably got the date close to right. If you look, Robin Lane Fox in his book on Christianity made a really nice case that I like, and if I ever see information that conflates it, I'll be happy to change my mind on it. But the idea that within the Josephus context, it's a good case can be made that John the Baptist was killed around AD 35. An AD 36 crucifixion for Jesus, very plausible, and that would make him 30 years old, which means he's born in 6, which is the time of the Quirinius census of Israel when it was annexed to the empire. So the numbers add up fairly nicely. And so from that range on, by the time you get down to the fire of Rome and the persecution under Nero, you've already got an interlocking bunch. You've got presumably Peter and company are coming to Rome. They're doing their mission. And of course, Paul later on takes advantage of the fact that he's got dual citizenship. We have corroborating evidence on Luke. NAS, oh, yipes. It's been probably quite a few years ago, but I seem to think around 2011. Anyway, where there's a place in a church in the Balkans that claims they've got the bones of Luke, carbon analysis and DNA on them. And they're the right dates, they're the right haplotypes. The history of the church is these bones were taken after something. I think some Muslims came in at some time and they were moved over to as the Byzantine Empire shrank. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. So a circumstantial case can be made that there was a real live Luke, and the chronology fits, and a lot of the Christian lore and that is correct. In the same way, Mormon lore, there's real Mormons knocking around. Why can't we assume the Christian church operates just like that? And I got a bunch of Mormons in the family, so I know inside out just exactly how they function. They're salt of the earth, and their theology's crap.
I think one of the things that was that stuck out especially to me was the inability to reflect or to draw parallels between what he considered true and the analogies that I proposed. And that's not just him. Yeah. That is a systemic issue among apologists and perhaps Christians in general. But when phenomenon,
and will apply outside of religion, but it certainly applies to religion. You want to see somebody just as rigid as our good old belligerent Christian. Look at Mormon apologists, look at Hindu apologists, look at Muslim apologists, look at fill in the blank, Native American apologists. It's set of contexts, but there's always a non-negotiable dogma that's gotta be true. information that conflicts with it, the shell, and you'll get this, well, I don't really think about that. And you're seeing that Tortugan phenomenon. The problem is the historian's duty is to explain all the data fairly and reasonably. And when you look at things, I think one of the things that made me into a non-believer early on, I wasn't raised in a religious household to begin with. I quickly discovered what my dad did. The reason why he left the Mormon church is because he enlisted in the army, lied about his age, by the way. He was 16, he was underage. This was in, I think, 1921. And he discovered, to his amazement, he'd never been outside of Utah, Mormon. And he discovered there were like non-Mormons. And they seemed to be getting along just fine. Like they were able to live their life fine without being Mormon. Threw off the religion like an old coat he didn't need because the warm weather had gotten warmer. It was literally like that. And so we were never things at all. We had a Christmas tree and we did all that kind of stuff, but we never went to any religious observances anywhere on holidays or anything else. So I was living in a totally secular environment. And I quickly, independently, with the Bertrand Russell logic, because I was a math kid, and I'm going, listen, all these religions have a series of content, and they all are functionally mutually incompatible. One or two answers. There's either 0 of them are true or 1 is. And it doesn't look like that any one of them seems to be any more likely than any other. Which I later learned out was the Occam's razor argument, is 0. Ta-da! And I was pissed off when I found out that Bertrand Russell had come up with the argument ahead of me, but you know, well, what do you do?
Darn logicians.
The one that really pissed me off because he was just gobsmackingly brilliant was William James. One that I never really paid. Yeah. Okay. William James is one of the great homegrown geniuses in America. He had a soft spot for psychic phenomena, but then everybody did in 1890. But when you read his stuff that he was writing in the books, and all of them are available now, boy, this guy thought about a lot. Animal consciousness, and of course, the will to believe is one, in my mind, is one of the great philosophical essays ever. It essentially lays out what I try to argue in my Noma D version of non-overlapping magisteria. Let's see, we've got something popping along in the comments here. Make sure we're not missing anything. Thanks, confusing. Yeah, it's just
something completely different.
Well, if anybody over there says something that we need to pay attention to, we will pay attention to it.
Well, I would like to throw in something regarding maybe the resurrection of Christ, because I had something happen in my life which happened literally in a day. It was when I was in the army. I used to go home on Wednesdays and then go back on Thursday morning. And at one Thursday, I got stopped by the police while making a sanitary stop along the way in the middle of nowhere.
You are so polite, sir. You pissed in the woods.
Yes, I pissed in the woods. And I was driving a van at the moment, and in that van I had absolutely nothing. A camping mattress, which I had thrown in there because I wanted to take my TV with me, because there was a party going on where I slept, and I didn't want them to smash my TV. I ended up getting that in a safe place, so I didn't use it. And then I was stopped. The previous Thursday, 4 girls were molested in that area by a guy driving in a big white car, and I was driving a white van at the moment, with a green jacket, and every soldier has a green jacket. I was completely in green at that moment. And now they looked in the back of the car and saw a mattress. So I was victim number one at that time. Spent, I think, about a couple of hours at the police station. They managed to get two of the girls to identify me. One of them immediately said, if that's not him, he looks like his twin brother. And I was released because my car didn't fit. They saw a guy driving a regular car and not a van. So it wasn't me. So it would have come out that it wasn't me after all. Then I drove to the barracks where I was located at the time. Was grilled by everyone for being late. And some of the guys, for them, it was the last day. That's why they had the party the evening before. One of them was one I had taken a ride with several times. So now what happened is that particular guy went home to my hometown and by accident was friends with friends of my father. Father and I didn't have the best of relationships at that moment. So he told his friend, who then told his parents, who rang my father, who told our previous neighbor, who called my mother. And by then the story was that I was in jail for raping 4 girls and I wouldn't be home anytime soon.
Yeah.
That's just in, I think it was in 5 or 6 hours where the story
takes on a life of its own. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
my star witness.
I thought I didn't worry my mother and just didn't say anything until I got home. So when I got home at Friday, I said, you never guess what happened to me Thursday morning. My mother replied, when did you get out of jail? So, and that's in a period of time, 5, 6 hours, where I'm
you have the advantage there with the rapid communication. So you would have it in the 1st century AD, you would have much slower communication, but at the same time, you also have a concomitantly slow error correction system going on to where the thing can have a stand.
This was over an entire country. When I go back to the Jesus account, that is in a area, so people could run from one person to another and convey the message, and it would pretty much be the same time.
So literally, the telephone game is traveling one apostle at a time, connecting up and mutating and developing as it goes. And remember, the other critical factor here is the amount that our brain decides things for us.
Yes.
If it pigeonholes something, it automatically does it, and it won't let you not do that. The classic example that I like to give is the moon illusion. By direct experience and experiment that the moon is the same size on the horizon as it is at the zenith, and you can verify it's about the size of your pinky fingernail. Your brain will invariably monster moon come up in your brain if it's particularly with trees and other buildings and stuff behind it. And no matter how many times you think it through, your brain will never not let you see it any other way. So there's some things that get pre-filtered in our heads. Once you have an epiphany moment, once you have a thing, it might be because of epilepsy in the case of possibly Paul, but there can also be and guilt over the fact that he'd been persecuting all of these Christians all the time, and his brain is doing all sorts of things going on behind the surface. And then
that's
poof,
like some Freudian psychology of religion, isn't it? The guilt factor.
I think some of that would go into there, because we have to know that he was a vicious persecutor of Christians as Saul. And then and now he's a changed man. Now, whether or not his underlying cognitive architecture really changed all that much, or what else is going on, heck, if we had a psychological study of him, if we had MRI studies, wouldn't that be helpful? But we don't. So but we can see how people behave today. We can look and see how the psychology of systems works today. And we can see how people can believe all sorts of things. And once they decide it's true, it must be true. Now, how many have heard of Hank Hanegraaff?
Nope.
Yes, I've heard of him.
Ooh, you need to know about the Bible Answer Man guy.
Wasn't he the
Big-
Bible Answer Man?
Yep, the Bible Answer Man guy. And he's still knocking around. He's a Dutch immigrant who writes tons of acronym-laden apologetics, including anti-evolution stuff, and that's how he came on my ballpark because of Tip Project.
What are you
And,
guys doing? What are you guys doing to the Dutch people? Every Dutch guy that moves to America becomes extremely religious. I don't get it.
I don't want to regard that as an indication of things. You know, there was a hilarious thing in the old National Lampoon where they were parodying the John Birch Society, and they had this group that was complaining about the Dutch trying to take over America, and so they were all that the Dutch are coming over here and they're going to chop our doors in half and make us wear wooden shoes and plant tulips and fluoridation.
Yeah,
It was just
Zuid-Bruggen has Dutch roots as well.
Yeah, it pops up a lot in a lot of different contexts, but I do not regard that. I mean, that you get the stupid people from all possible contexts. Anyway, Hank Hanegraaff is somebody that I know.
Am I the only one hearing echoes?
Maybe. I'm not hearing at the moment.
I think it's because James isn't wearing headphones.
Not anymore. Okay.
Yeah, well, and it'll be a while before I can ever afford to get a headphone, so I'm just playing it by ear. But I'm not getting any roboting from anybody.
It was for about a minute or two, but not anymore. I can't hear it anymore. It's gone.
Was the God of Dutchland that has come in to warn us of our iniquity.
But anyway,
I think I brought that in because God is somehow punishing me. I should have had a co-host today, and that didn't work. So maybe he's tracing me and trying to mess up
God
everything.
works
I'm part
in various ways, don't he? Anyway,
yes.
Hank Hanegraaff was fascinating because I was really now knee-deep in the methods approach to analysis. And in the pecking order, Hank Hanegraaff is really slim pickings. He is somebody who is basically copying a small amount, not even a large amount, just a small amount of creationist stuff. And he's a parasitical citer. Because there was an instance where he had this proto-avis bird case where he was copying the stuff lock, stock, and barrel off of Duane Gish, and then he would cite the technical papers. And he said, also cited by Duane Gish. He was a tidy and honest parasitical scholar. But the reason why I knew he had literally got it from Duane Gish is because it contained a typographical error that was uniquely in Gish's account. So, I mean, I didn't have to worry about it. So all I have to imagine is that Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Peter are no more scholarly meticulous than a Hank Hanegraaff to account for an awful lot of telephone gaming in the early part of the church, where somebody latches onto a blip they want to be true and they repeat it and the other person picks it up and it starts resonating and blah, 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 blah. If we had the primary sources, we could decide all of this issue. So it's all bloody speculation. A poor, diligent Christian wants to believe the story without examination, fine and dandy. But I think it always behooves our side to take as most plausible an explanation as possible. And for me, the brother of Jesus got mistaken scenario, and then the rest got riffing as a telephone game over time, is the one that is a seed that resonates well with me. It resonates dramatically and psychologically. That I can see that happening in a way that just making it up out of whole cloth approach, like Dianetics, makes more sense to me.
That's kind of what Chris waiting that there was no prior event. It must have just started with the apostles and disseminated from there. If
nothing exists in a vacuum, so the notion of resurrection cults and the rest of the atonement concept. A lot of this stuff is the stuff that entered into official Christianity. And remember, we had a big pileup of variant forms of Christianity. You see this even in the official Gospels, where Paul is constantly writing snark letters at various Christian denominations saying, "You're veering from the path." And then this is still in the 1st century. Then later on, by the time we get to Constantine's era, we've got heresies knocking around. The reason why I brought up Saint Perpetua, I think, comes in the Domitian persecution, which was the most vicious ones that occurred. I think that was in the 3rd century. That's when, just afterward, Constantine then legalized the Christian church. Anyway, she was from, I think, I always get confused. They both start with M's. There's the Marcionites, and then there's another one. And she was from one of them. But they were a messianic group that were expecting the imminent second coming of Christ, and it was already getting kind of late for imminent, but nevertheless, they were holding on. And ironically, she would have been burned as a heretic by the Catholic Church a few centuries later, because this was regarded as a heresy. And there was a little teeny bunch of them that eventually skedaddled off somewhere into Iran or Iraq, and they still have a small remnant bunch that went on for centuries and centuries, may still exist, I don't know. But anyway, Saint Perpetua is a classic example of a Catholic saint, of fiddly bit details, believed in an aberrant version of Christianity, and yet she willingly went to her martyrdom. So you wouldn't argue that she wasn't faithful, that she wasn't absolutely convinced of everything that she believed. But does that mean that everything she believed is true? Well, she was believing in a heresy, standard Christianity that she was dying for. It was the version that she believed to be true. And I suspect, if we could see the primary sources and could see interviews with people and what the lady next door was saying, that the richness that we can get in what has survived would be magnified even more, that you would have this positive thicket, and that the received version through the Nicene Creed version of Christianity was not necessarily even what was believed in by the early apostles, because we're only getting the edited version of stuff. Comments?
My knowledge of early Christianity is not exceptional. I'm not a history major. I'm all about that systematics and phylogenetics. But I'm drinking all of this up, taking it in, absorbing it.
That's why, damn it all,
osmosizing all this information.
People to get the chapter 6 because the Bible tells me so PDF from my website. I was not out to refute Christianity in it. It was a very specialized topic, which is, you got all these anti-evolutionists and they have a crappy method. How do they're all religious. So how do they approach their religious apologetics? Surprise, the same crappy method. And so I was looking into how they data selected, how they avoided controversial issues, how they sidestep stuff. And I focused in on 2 big monster theodicy problems, which is the Exodus 21 slavery problem and the whole issue of biblical slavery. So I went into that in great detail, and you know, Jackson, how that led me to Dinesh D'Souza issues and all that kind of stuff, which isn't in the old chapter book, but that's continuing a follow-up. And then the other, of course, is the train wreck between Matthew and Luke on the Messianic credentials. I don't give a rat's ass, although I allude to some of them, some of the little minor typographical errors between Chronicles and Kings versions and all that. And if you're an inerrantist, you snag on them because the Bible isn't supposed to contain internal errors. Right. But they're small potatoes. Luke 1, or Matthew, Mark 1, Matthew, Luke, is an actual train wreck, because they are the only gospels that are attempting to show Messianic credentials. To be the Messiah, you got to be born in David's city, of Davidic ancestry, and you got to set up the kingdom of Israel. And that's where the Perusia, the non-Perusia comes in as a big snag. But you've got, that's why I bring up that year Jesus was born, because the nativity stories in Matthew and Luke are completely at loggerheads. They're 10 years apart because you can't pull too far forward no matter how you squish it, and you can't move the Quirinius census, although some of them try. And if you look at how they try to dance around that chronological problem, they're using the same methods that Nostradamus believers use. Explicitly make the Nostradamus connection between him and the Josh McDowell as to how they apply reasoning.
Oh, Josh McDowell.
Good Josh McDowell. Yes, he's.
I actually got a book from my grandmother. It's his most popular
Evidence
book.
that demands a verdict.
Yep. I have that book. It is not fun.
It's a model of pseudo scholarship, and it is indistinguishable from Nostradamus believers in how they parse the data set, how they rely on secondary sources, how they dance around chronology, and I have a whole section on it, an excerpted section in chapter 6 part, because I'm dealing with their analysis. Well, it gets worse of the genealogy problem, which remember is only in Matthew and the same Luke. Trace Jesus' ancestry from 2 separate sons of David. And so, as I point out in the book, unless we had a hitherto implausible homosexual relationship between Nathan and Solomon, how the hell can you have the genealogies match up? Well, the conservatives have taken the approach of just rewriting the New Testament. Mary's name, and they decide that Luke's genealogy is actually of Mary. Ta-da! Problem solved. But who the hell gave them right to rewrite the New Testament? The only reason why they're doing it is because they have to in order to reconcile it with the Matthew version. And there was one little obscure blip to it just in a side bit, and I later on researched it. There was a claim, 18th century writer, and once in a while, some modern apologists will pick up on this old material. They say that there's actually one of the Jewish Hagigas that acknowledges that Mary is descended from Nathan. And I thought, gosh, that's an interesting argument to make. That being used more often. Is it possibly because it isn't true? So I started looking up this thing, and it turned out it traced back to a 19th century Bible apologist who made this assertion, the Tractate Hagiga. And fortunately, there's quite a Judaica collection at the Gonzaga University, so I went over there and tracked down all the ones that I could in the originals. Nope, there is no reference to Mary in there. It's just completely fictional. So what are the odds that 2 independent wingnuts could come up with the same non-existent Hagiga source? No, both of them, one of them mentioned the source they got it from, the other one didn't. Secondarily, why? Because it's a non-existent source, and therefore they had to have been copying it from the only person who claimed it was an existent source. That's scholarship is a contact sport, Einstein and Jackson. You must understand this. It is not for the squeamish. It's their Achilles heel. And it's the Achilles heel of bad reasoning everywhere. Although if you can keep, barbarians can burn you at the stake or shoot you with their bad method. The Nazis showed that pretty damn well. And some of the people in Trumplandia look like they're getting the spears sharpened up as we speak with their fake news and alternative facts shtick. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because the moment you start history and pretending that a dogmatic assertion about the data stream is okay, and it's just your opinion, and your opinion is just as good as everybody else, and your facts aren't even right because they're from the wrong side of the fence, you get into troubles. And you can get into pogroms, and you can get into gulags, and you can get in. North Korea is an absolute exemplar by a narcissistic megalomaniac where everything caters to his perfection and superlativeness, and everything is always going well because the state media tells you so. Somebody else we know that doesn't live in North Korea? It's in baby format, but my general rule. Yeah. Question.
It's probably completely the opposite, but it's a question that I've been dying to ask Jackson and haven't had a chance.
Who, me?
Belligerent Christian. Is he avoiding the Bible as much with you as he does with me? what we're discussing
Yeah.
discussing here is pretty much the resurrection as it is in the Bible and the flaws that are in it, but he just doesn't want to go there.
Well, I kind of appreciate that he's not trying to use the Bible as his source. He's at least attempting to look at extra biblical sources to sort of root his belief in a historical basis, but he's sincerely failing on that front because he's pointing to guys who lived years after the fact, or he's pointing to the claims themselves as evidence that they're true, which is still the issue.
And I know exactly why, at least I suspect. It's because he's got them secondarily. I don't think he's read any of those original sources or tried to. He's simply copied arguments that he's gotten secondarily, and they mention Josephus, and they mention Tacitus, and he's memorized the little trope, and that's what he's spilling up. Because even in the short exchange that you had with him that I was listening to, terms would come up, familiar with them. He didn't realize what the Perusia was. Excuse me, this is stuff that if you read even the conservative Bible apologists, you're going to get that term popping up all the time. Greek word for the second coming that's used predominantly.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that word was mentioned towards the beginning, of our conversation.
Yeah, I started using it because it's a shorthand and it's what's used in the scholarly literature. The Perusia is the second coming thing, and the failure of it to occur anytime when everyone was expecting it to. The fact that this was a common belief, it was ubiquitous, that as far as we can tell, everybody in the apostle set and Paul as well thought the second coming was imminent. And Paul, in fact, at one point is saying the equivalent of keep your bags packed, it's any minute now, just hold on, boom. And of course, he's in a time frame in which you're still in the first century. And so this was an easier thing to deal with, in the same way that the Millerites' prophecies of the end of the world were feasible, at least about giving a date. And that's the one advantage of the Jesus mythology, is that it never quite gave a date. To be a coming attraction, the longest coming attraction trailer in movie history without the feature showing up.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're right. It's just kind of a repeating of all the arguments he brought up. I had heard elsewhere from
which means
maybe William Lane Craig or Seitan Bruggencate or whoever, but I had heard all the points he brought up, and I think there are, and even if I'm not able to particularly articulate what I think is wrong with them or what the fundamental flaws of these positions are, there are people like Matt Dillahunty, Bart Ehrman, etc., who can and who do on a regular basis. And so not one of these arguments has actually stood up to scrutiny, to intense scrutiny. Especially
or worse, that if you apply the standards that they're using to other religions,
or
they also get to play the game.
If they would just, it's really funny. Someone once told me, or asked me, who. No, they didn't ask me. They just asked like a general. I think it was on a video. They said, "Who criticizes conspiracy theories the most intensely? The believers of other conspiracy theories." What? I can't remember what video I saw.
There's
that
nothing
on.
more hilarious to see than young Earth creationists like Purdom and that go after flat earthers.
Was that Paul? That might have been was that a video by Paul Agia? That might have been.
He may have done a thing on it, but one just recently, because I saw a reference to it that just popped up recently.
They made two videos because Ken Ham is gone. Georgia Purdom made two videos on the flat Earth thing because someone approached her at some speech.
Oh boy, we're not literalists on that.
Yeah, that was and so he said like like the hollow earthers criticize the flat earthers very intensely, etc. But it's like neither of them are willing to look at like the evidence against their own positions.
Or apply the same standard. This was why, from a methodological point of view, double standards are the key. That suddenly young earth creationists, when they go after either geocentrists, because there's a much larger block of geocentrists than there are flat earthers, and they are more influential than the flat earthers. But suddenly they have to turn into the most methodological, naturalist, facty guys, and they have to be very wary about how they deal with scripture because their opponents are on the same turf. And this is the reason why old earth creationism has always been a problem, because if you're going to use one set of standards to deal with cosmology questions and another one to deal with evolution standards, the fact that the creationists straddle the boundary, that they use the same methodology for anti-evolutionism as they do for young earth creationism. The method they use for anti-evolutionism is identical to what the non-young earth creationists use for anti-evolutionism. It's data selection, never figuring out what they think happened, and so forth and so on. So earth creationism has always been kind of a tough road to hoe methodologically, and it's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. Effectively, it's you, Ross, and a small number of people orbiting around them. And the intelligent designers just avoid it. They just skip that, so they never have to think about it. But if bring popcorn to see Steve Meyer try to explain young earth creationist is wrong. He's not a young earth creationist, definitely not. But I'd like to see him do that without using methodological naturalism. I don't think he can. Be fun to see him try. Done that. And I can see why, because they're hoist on their own methodological petard. There's one method of reasoning. You pay attention to all the data, you work out what you think happened, you work out a hypothesis, you try to test it out, and you have standards for changing your mind and saying, well, so much for my theory or my hypothesis. They don't do that. They can't do that.
Nope.
And so all of it's just parsing apologetics.
Totally, I agree.
Well, I thought it was fun to watch those two shows because they use exactly the same methods to flat Earth that they use to actually prove young Earth creationism, and
yeah,
to me that was hilarious.
And this is what is ironic. Although there are apparently a few not creationist, they are not many. That historically speaking, the flat Earth movement came out of the remnants of the modern world discarding the old biblical view, geocentrism. Your geocentrics, I don't know of any geocentrist who isn't a creationist Christian. Malcolm Bowden and Gerardus Boo. Boo is a computer engineer. There's an awful lot of wackaloony engineers and physicists in that. The physicists were really credulous on psychic phenomena. Are today and were back in the 19th century. Most of the people that were in the Psychic Research Society there in Britain and in America tended to be physicists. And it's that talking and to think that their love of numbers and precision to another area that they know diddly. And it gives them a false sense of control. Where they're trying to wade into an area where they're dealing with psychology and they're dealing with history and squishy areas where you have to use a much more sophisticated analysis. History is not for the squeamish. You either come up with, unlike geology, people can lie and people can put up monuments to their own egos and that. And so the ability to do propaganda and that in history makes all historical analysis much tougher to do. Not impossible. It's still a rigorous discipline, and it's gotten more and more rigorous over time, and I can see that, and that's because I know the historiography field. That was one of my areas in college, and my most influential teacher, Professor Barnes, in retrospect, was my historiography teacher that I was in. He taught me sound method to study the history of history, to be able to parse out how people have changed their viewpoints and their methodologies over time. That's at the core of analytical methodology. And that ultimately made me the person that I am today. And I gave up a lot of wackaloon views, not because I had tremendous epiphanies, but because I started applying that method everywhere and let the chips fall where they may. And boy, there were chips that fell.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a devout methodologist. That you first of all, you want to find out what the data set is. You want to ground things in primary sources. That was a big thing that Professor Barnes always beat into us. He did it gently. All you have to do is imagine a guy that looks like old enough to remember, but Jackson, you probably do not remember either James Mason or Jimmy Stewart, although maybe Jimmy Stewart, because of A Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just imagine a fusion between Captain Nemo from the Disney Nautilus and Jimmy Stewart from Life or Harvey, and him smoking pipes in class. Where you could do that legally. And so a lot of my Greek and Roman history teacher also was a pipe smoker in class. So you had these nice wafting aromas of cigars and of pipe smoke that would be utterly illegal today. So it was, I had no problem with it because it was quite aromatic and charming. But anyway, Barnes do us. Never confuse the primary and a secondary source. And the moment you do, the second you do that, you've just fallen off the bus. Because now you are forgetting that you are seeing a redaction of information, not the information itself. And you'll notice that the vast majority of people on religion and politics and creationism and geronism, and it doesn't matter the ism, are people who are addicted to secondary sources. And they have a lack of curiosity to do follow-up and fact-checking.
Yeah, I mean, it's also that someone once said, I don't remember who, that science-lish is a lot different from English. There's a lot of difficulty that these people have in reading papers because they look at this and they see word salad. I mean, you know, to some of us we can look at it.
That's another matter. There's the matter when you bump into primary sources. If you look in any field, get into. Because you've only seen secondary sources and you start to look at the primary material. And if it looks like word salad to you at the primary source level, back off, because it instantly is a flag that you are out of your depth.
I wish
and when you can reach the stage and not have your eyes glaze over or steam come out of your ears, then you know you're in a position to be able to defend it rigorously, not just as an apologetic argument.
Right. And I mean, these people can't even read the abstract most of the time. They can't even read.
Denise O'Leary is a hilarious example. She's a secondary source addict and almost never. You're familiar with her from the Evolution News and Science Today. It's called Science.
What is her name?
A Canadian intelligent design advocate and kind of a Dinesh D'Souza light. And she goes after a lot of stuff. Yeah, she's on a lot of postings. I got a ton of stuff in the bibliography from her. But she'll have these barrage posts where there will be dozens of links in them. And almost every single one of them is to a secondary source. It'll be to a Phys.org or to a Science Daily or something that's referring to a technical. Rarely does she ever bump into the actual paper itself. And I see no indication she ever bothers to read the papers themselves. She doesn't even necessarily read closely the content of. I've spotted things where I go, excuse me, but did you not notice this? Sometimes I'll make a point of when I'm printing out the secondary source material, which I don't always allude to, but there's sometimes where it's useful. I'll put a box or bold for the sections they've quoted because I want to see what they don't quote. And there are quite a few examples of people where I've discovered, oh, you just had to walk right past that to get to the spot you decided to quote. And remember the Dracula rule that if they go to the point of actually citing the work, it is fair game to get them on. And that's a dangerous thing to do around me.
Yeah, it's Yeah, the whole
the whole
of secondary source usage is ridiculous. Because they'll just send it to you. They'll say, "Oh, look what I found," and they'll toss it out there as though it's an argument.
But look at the logic of it, methodologically. It's a giant secondary source.
Or tertiary or quaternary.
They're illustrating the very point. Very sources. There is not a single text in the New Testament that purports to have been written by Jesus. Everything is a secondary account of what people remember Jesus saying. Luke, by definition, is a secondary source. So here, I compile all of this stuff from people I've read and of people I've interviewed, la-di-la. Who? Who did he read? We don't know. He never tells us. Who did he interview? We don't know. He never tells us. Do we have text to look at to check the statements against? No, because none of that survives. You've got this floating air of Luke, and it's interesting that some of the biggest variations, small but still, variations that occur between Matthew, Mark, and Luke are in the Luke version of the text. That clearly indicates that somebody has been playing around with the material as to what they decided was the received wisdom. And remember that on that, it's only Matthew and Luke. And remember, now the modern scholarship thinks that Mark is actually the earliest of the Gospels, not Matthew. Two versions that got the Messianic credential story are Matthew and Luke, which are later than the original earlier material in Mark. A chronological frame that looks like people who are trying to tidy up the theology and fill in the brick wall with the dogma that only began to develop after gospel events for which we have no primary sources.
But hey, if the Bible says it, that means it's true.
Why is it so difficult to, why is it so difficult to show Christians that what we have in the Bible is all secondhand, is all hearsay? Why is it so difficult for them to realize that?
Well, it's the same thing we were talking about earlier, I mean, it's the cognitive bias of it's us versus them. We got to stick with our material because it's ours. We can't let...
Well, it's that Tartucan concept that I've got, that what I would see over and over again, and this was independent of how bright they were. Philip Johnson is a fabulous exemplar here, and Richard Milton, too, the functional young earth creationist Mensa guy over in Britain, is because these are clearly not dumb people. David Berlinski is not a stupid person. William Lane Craig is not a stupid person. And so you've got an awful lot of people. He's annoying, but nevertheless... And so you've got an awful lot of people that are very careful and meticulous in their own frame, but at core, they can easily confuse a primary and a secondary source cognitively, and they lack curiosity. They have the ability not to think about things they don't want to think about. The goal of a methodological analysis is to pin down where people are getting their data set from, whether they fact-checked or not. Don't. And all you have to do is ask them, and you'll get silence because they won't lie. They will not claim to have done something that they haven't. And then if you can find one of their Tartucan ruts frame where the thing they don't think about, the thing they want to be true, but they don't think about things that they don't think about part, identify one of those and ask them a methods question about that core information, you're going to get the deer in the headlight look. Silence mode. And then if they answer a question, it won't be the question you asked. And I think we've all probably bumped into people where we've tried to probe on stuff and you get this response that's not what you just can't get them to get onto that question. You're bumping into a Tartucan rut. How their brain, it's all subconscious. It's all pre-conscious level. Then you have the fact that the defining characteristic of their mind is they have an object of desire. They have the thing they want to be true. Neurology takes, like the Krell machine in Forbidden Planet, to make sure that things in their conscious mind all mesh up together on that. And do that, wow, you get all sorts of strange things, and it's frustrating to somebody outside of it. That's why the internal contradictions issue is test. If the Tartucan model is right, one way to identify aspects of it would be to identify internal contradiction failures. And there's been just a bit of neuroscience material, but not targeted in the way that I kind of like to do it. I would predict that if you ran Hank Hanegraaff under an MRI, the genealogy of Joe Blow, and that was mutually contradictory, not the contradiction. But if you gave him the genealogies of Matthew and Luke, and he recognized it as the Davidic ancestry, his brain would kick in, and there would be something different in the way the error correction system doesn't kick in under those circumstances, and that would help identify it. But what throws a lot of these analyses off is theorists make the mistake to think only people who believe things that aren't true have this problem. But I'm contending the same thing is occurring with people who believe things that are true. Have people that we don't notice that this is going on because they happen to have mapped onto things that are true as opposed to things that are false, and so they're not tripping up in quite the same way. But I think it's a universal phenomenon, but it's purely a hypothesis. I tried to talk Sam Harris into doing a cognitive study on this, but I was a nobody, and he was busy with other things, and maybe someday to where we can prod him to actually kind of analyze this issue at a neuroscience level to see whether or not it's a real phenomenon. I'm likely thinking that it must have something to do with the anterior cingulate cortex, because that's involved in our self-deception system. So I would be gobsmacked if that wasn't playing a role in this hypothetical Matthew Harrison Brady syndrome, I don't think about things I don't think about phenomenon. But the only way to find out is to do the studies.
Well, I think I've watched a lot of epistemology video. I think that's at least a tool to try and break it, because that's where you don't anything. You just let the person talk and ask questions, and ask questions in a way have to think about what they think they know.
And you'll observe them not thinking about it. It's fascinating that at least so far, when I have asked any creationists, or I bumped into flat earthers and a bunch of, and Dinesh D'Souza for that matter, although he's not chatty. But when I would be asking them, oh, that's an interesting thing for it, and sometimes they'll give a source and sometimes they don't. But then how did they verify it? You get silence on that. And I'm contending that literally their brain doesn't think they need to do that. Use the secondary with the primary source. They got something that says what they want to be true. And an awful lot of politics and religion are social institutions that favor that kind of mind. Looking at goal-oriented issues, it's object-oriented and conclusion-oriented, and the ends justify the mean part can just slide in rapid. There is a certain degree to which a methodical, analytical, show me the evidence, I'm not going to accept the evidence until I see the evidence part, is not something that is necessarily terribly successful. I think for the most of humans' history, it wasn't, because the people that were snap judgment moralists who came out and burned you at the stake won the argument much more than the rational book readers in the monastery. But when we finally started clumsily to develop a scientific method, that's a system where you have to play the methods game. That's the game, an entirely different dynamic. And then you can start looking at the historiography of how different scientists have functioned, who are good scientists and who are bad scientists. When scientists make the wrong conclusions over time, how did they arrive at them? And we've now got an awful lot of literature on that kind of stuff. We know that there are cliques that go on in the scientific community because they're human institutions. I think I may have mentioned, I may have mentioned it with Jackson before, but if not, the big tussle between Richard Dawkins and Stephen Jay Gould over sociobiology stuff.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
That's a classic example, because boy, this was fist fight level, and people were throwing eggs at E.O. Wilson. He's now this avuncular grandfather talking about consilience and let's save the butterflies today, but you have no idea how vitriolic the stuff was back in the
I've
1970s
always liked
and
E.O.
80s.
Wilson. He seems like a good guy. He wrote sociobiology, which was his big magnum opus, I think.
Deep in a really hotbed thing. This was during the Vietnam War. He was relatively politically conservative when you had an awful lot of firebrand quasi-Marxists knocking around in the community. And then you had a big international element between the American paleontologists, who tended to be very leftists, and the John Maynard Smith, Richard Dawkins, biological zoology gang over in Britain, that adaptation issues. There were just a lot of fighting words going on. And it has all the same hallmarks of complex social networking that most people don't notice today. Now, there are going to be new, and this is not something that we're immune to. Another area that's kind of faded, but was, boy, fighting words thing, was over multi-regionalism versus out of Africa regarding human origins.
We talked about both of those in my anthropology class.
They're basically dead letters because they were both right and both wrong. The human species originated in Africa, but there is gene flow. And so there are pulses, and when you understand genes and avatars and all these different population admixtures and hybridization zones and prezygotic isolation mechanisms that we know from other species, that once you got over the single species dogma that was just plaguing paleoanthropology back in the 60s and 70s, that was just today, because we now can see a shrubbery of hominids, shrubbery of cousins, and things kind of settle down, and we're the oddity of the one where the one primate species in the hominids that ended up not dropping dead. And so we made us think, because our history was so narrow, that we kind of extended that back in. And I covered that in chapter 5 of an awful lot of that stuff, and how this connected up with the creationism debates and Solly Zuckerman and all that kind of stuff. When you know the context of it and can see how we've advanced haplotypes of all the humans, and we can trace a lot of these back and forth, so we have Neanderthal DNA and Denisovan DNA to where we can actually see the tracers of this stuff. Now we're in a whole new ballpark, and all of that stuff sounds just fuddy-duddy. It's like talking about VCRs versus fax machines and the like back in the 70s. You just move on.
Well, I would love to stay and continue this conversation, but I unfortunately have to go.
I hope this was an entertaining after show.
Always is.
We still got a few viewers. Come on, anybody, you got damn cameras out there? You could pop into here. I'll put the blurb on our thing there, just in case anybody wants to come in. They can. We are just as easily. All right. And I'll put that in there. Come into the Google Hangouts. If you can, and join the parade. We know Apologia's got a damn camera. A few of these others do. That it's fun to get a little bit. You all know how much I love to talk, but I also am fascinated with.
That's why I've been silent. I love to listen.
Remember, I will repeat this to everybody. We're offended if somebody says, "Shut up, Jim, I got to get a word in edgewise, or I have a question." Because I know I can go on and on and on about stuff. And other people, however, may have a bit. I try to keep my eye going over to look at the side comments and stuff going on, because sometimes you get some really interesting little feedback and comments on stuff.
I want to say, well, thanks for having me on after the show. Thanks for watching my conversation with Chris. And,
or coming over and being in the very first live broadcast from Jimmy's stupid YouTube thing.
I enjoyed it quite a bit. Always learn neat stuff. All right.
I hope you download the chapter 6 of the book, because there's a hell of a lot of material and scholarship in there. It needs a lot of updating because I've done work since. But nonetheless, it can at least kind of give you some sea legs on a lot of these kinds of issues that are lurking behind the scenes of the apologists, who they don't know about it either, because they're relying on secondary sources.
I look forward to reading about it. and stuff.
The Bible tells me so. That should get people pissed off. In fact, one idiot just reviewed Evolution Slam Dunk. He said, I didn't get your book chapter that Mr. Downard sent to me, which was chapter 6 from the website, which isn't from Slam Dunk, and it's not about what Slam Dunk is about. It's completely different subject matter. So he was attacking this completely irrelevant subject he didn't buy. So I'm going, sorry, you made a little mistake on that one. Could you try actually reading my material? And I actually pointed out that 3 macroevolutionary episodes and chapter 2 of the book did in fact have discussions of the reptile mammal transition thing. So at the very least he could go there, but because the Bible is completely different subject matter. Anyway, bye-bye, Jackson. Have a great day.
See you guys later. Bye, RJ. Bye, Peter. I'll see you guys.
So, I'm curious, Einstein.
Okay, what?
How did you get into the interest in all of this? How long has it been? Was there some kind of a moment where you suddenly realized you had to be under the bonnet, or what brought you into it all?
Definitely. I was looking for stuff on YouTube, and I bumped into a video of Kent Hovind, and that's why I'm here.
Ooh, that would scare the daylights out of you, doesn't it?
Yep, because I come from an atheist country, from a completely atheist background, completely secular.
And you're going, what is this guy saying?
It was to me, it was exactly like someone explaining that Hogwarts was real and the magic was real. It was that alien to me. So, and I just got hooked on his videos, and I watched, I think, everything he ever put out. I started with his either. I started with
Let's say hi to our new member, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Einstein, because I'm definitely wanting to hear more of your tale. Hi, Mike.
Mike?
The screen up there, it popped up. Obviously, you are not a male, Mike. Could be Michaela.
No, is it showing up on my son's Yahoo account, or YouTube account again? Because it's showing up on mine. Oh, good grief. Well, this is Christina Blackfeather, actually.
It was just a tiny thumbnail up on my screen, and I just caught the tiny little bit of it. So my bad for mangling your identification on there. Is it Mikarati?
That's my son's account. I'm Christina Blackfeather, the one that's been in your side chat with the Pinnacle, but I don't know why Google logged me in on the Hangout under my son's account.
Google is having trouble. I've had the same
crap happens on Google.
Yeah, no, Google is having trouble with login. If you have multiple accounts, Google will now automatically take you to their preferred account, not if that's your account, because I
had of fuss-potting with Strike, leading me like the little dog to the final conclusion to figure out how to get this damn thing to work, so that I could do it on my webpage. Anyway, we'll put a slight thing on Christina.
Yes.
While we go back over to Edison, because he was telling the tale of how he got in. He had seen Kent Hovind videos, and about how long ago was that?
I think anywhere about 4 to 5 years ago. So what I did, I started watching everything he ever made. I was just baffled by the nonsense.
Hello. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I go way back on Kent, because I go back to the pre-internet. First bumped into him in the 1990s, and he was just starting to come up. He'd actually already been doing and his evangelical stuff for quite a few years, and my brother had a creationist friend, and he loaned me this tape. Because he said, Jimmy, analyze this, because it sounds like crap, and you know more about this stuff. And so I did. And that was part of the reason why I eventually got off on the Troubles in Paradise project, because as I started to delve into why Kent Hovind was crap, and also the intelligent design movement, I realized, I got kind of a lot of stuff that I figured out. A lot of the stuff that you're seeing online from Hovind now are much more recent videos. Probably most of the ones that he did just before he got into Slammer. So this would probably be the early 2000s. But he's basically repeating the same tropes that has been going on 20 years or more. And make no mistake about it, Kent Hovind is an influential character in the anti-evolution biz. Even though he's a nincompoop, he is a popular nincompoop. And I bump into way more Kent Hovindistas in the actual world than I ever do anybody that's read a Michael Behe book or has scuttled their way through a Baraminology at Answers in Genesis. So that's a really important thing on that. So I'll also point out that growing young Earth creation is a presence in Europe. And it's because of people who have been evangelists that are going over and lecturing, usually from the Institute for Creation Research and to some extent AIG. And there's some homegrown ones over in Britain. So that like a new branch of venereal disease and the game of bridge. This is an illness that America is helping to spread around the world. So, Christina, things about that. And then we'll also bring in Paul, because I'd like everybody to kind of have a little intro to put in their perspectives on things.
Well, I started reading microbiology back when I was 10. So, and I'm almost 50 now. I got introduced to Kent Hovind and the ilk about, I'd say like 4 years ago, because my husband was listening to Thunderfoot and the whole Venom Fang X argument going back and forth. And the Why People Laugh at Creationist series. And then I started listening and I just branched off from there. So...
Yeah, see, I'm a print guy, so I came all through this, and because I'm a primary source guy, I'm very interested in when I can ground something in primary source documentation. And Kent is actually a secondary redactor. He's a superficial one. I don't think he's had an original thought in his brain. All he's ever done is copy other creationist arguments. And so when anybody wants to debate him, what you want to do is to push him to find out where he's stealing his information from. And of course, did he ever fact check it? Oh, I'm afraid not.
Yeah.
Say a little hi on yourself. We're seeing you got your microphone off at the moment, but kind of give a little brief intro. I don't remember whether you've been in some of Cy Strike's movie nights or not. The image looks a little familiar.
Hi, you talking to me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talking to me? Are you talking to me? I'm talking to you. Yeah.
You cut out there for a second. I wasn't quite sure. Hi.
I think everybody ought to have a little bit of a say, and I'm kind of curious to know the background and thing of how you got into the study of things, what the sort of things that you're fascinated with, and that in the same way that the other of us have all bumped into various characters.
Okay. So when I first kind of became an atheist, so I was just an atheist, and I didn't really care much about debating or anything like that. But then my sister, who is a young Earth creationist, kind of dragged me. Yeah, my family's very religious, and she kind of dragged me into this huge debate. Now she like homeschools all of her 8 kids or however many it is, and she teaches them that the dinosaurs and people lived at the same time and all that stuff. So she drags me into this huge debate, and ever since I've been basically preparing for the next time.
Thanksgivings must be really fun for you.
Oh, I actually haven't spoken to her.
I hypothesize that she would maybe be drawing off of either Abeka. That's one of the groups. There's a lot of homeschooling books from there that are young Earth creationist friendly. And then, of course, a smattering of stuff that comes from AIG and ICR that are directed to that. It'd be fascinating to know their curriculum list, because that can tell you an awful lot about dynamics of stuff and how recent some of it is and how much of it is riffing off of websites. And there's the scholar in me, because my Troubles in Paradise Maw is trying to do something that no one has ever kind of done before, which is to get a complete grip on the entire corpus of anti-evolutionism and its primary source base. Literally, no one had ever measured that before, not even at the NCSE. And so I'm now already to the stage, because I've got over 50,000 sources in my bibliography. I've got some 8,000 anti-evolution sources from 2,000 people. And so I can make measurements as meta-analysis that nobody had been able to tinker with. There's only like 48 people in the evolution biz that are fact claimants. Everybody else is a copyist. And Kent Hovind, they would all be the copyist part. So that means you've got a different dynamic when you're dealing with, say, a Jeffrey Tompkins than you would be if you were debating with a Kent Hovind, because one of them is a fact claimant and the other one is just a doofus copyist.
I see.
Yeah. So back to Einstein. I didn't forget you.
Okay.
So you had seen a bunch of Kent Hovind videos.
Yeah, I can cut it short a little bit, but yeah, Kent Hovind drove me in. While searching for more videos of Kent Hovind online, I bumped into the atheist experience, and all the time that I've been watching Kent Hovind, I was shouting at the monitor, and now here was a show where people were actually talking to the people that believed it.
Like we're not the one.
Yes, so now I am getting more and more jealous of the people at the atheist experience, because they get to talk to the people, which is something that I want. It's not going to happen here, because although Kent Hovind is the most known creationist in Holland, has copied his material.
Not surprising, but scary.
Yes. Very.
Yes. And at the moment, I think his son Eric is the main proponent in Germany, because I haven't put it out yet, but I had a talk with an affiliate of Creation Today, who runs pretty much the same thing in Germany, and is in contact with Creation Today and AIG. When I bumped into the atheist experience, I just got jealous, and just like you, I like to talk, and like Matt Dillahunty says, I like to hear myself talk. So option was to get out there and talk, and I've done that now on Twitter for, I think, coming close to 3 years. And this year decided it's not enough. I want to have a YouTube channel, and I want to actually talk to people, because 140 characters isn't enough to have a meaningful conversation.
I can do it. Anybody can do it.
Yes. So
and it was zero cost. I didn't have to pay anything for it other than just having the camera. All of the Google crap is all their stuff. So you just load it and figure out how to do it.
I have to pay for it, because what I want is something similar visually to the atheist experience. I want to have some kind of a studio.
Okay.
Wow.
So
really intrigues me about all three of you is that all of you were not coming into this in relation to intelligent design. And boy, that's going to piss them off. The fact that it's the young earth creationist branch that's the squeaky wheel here, not intelligent design. No one's paying attention to them.
No, but intelligent design is just creationism in a new jacket. There's no difference.
Yeah.
I just call them all design proponents.
Yeah.
Yeah. See design.
So I'll now be investing in this. What I'm going to do. I decided to have a computer custom built, so I can at least make some good video, and that's my next step. I'll be bringing in a co-host. Just because
I like
don't.
that idea as well. And conversations with people, I think, are vastly more interesting. I really won't be doing any single talking head videos anymore. I think this is a much more useful format, because there's exchange and you can find out stuff in a way that a fixed a recorded video just doesn't do.
No, and that's what I thought. The recorded videos, at least to me, are the same thing as the street preacher, you have one person shouting, and the others either listening or not listening. To be able to confront people and to have an actual talk. And the only thing that I found lacking about the atheist experience is, and that's not putting it down in any way, but they have a limited time and they want to get in as much as they can and have as much different conversation to keep it interesting.
Yeah, it's always the matter of how to handle
the people just more time to focus just on one person, and through Twitter finding people that at least are different, so I can have different topics in every single talk. And I have the additional thing where when to have a talk, I offer them a second talk where they decide the topic, but they don't get to share the topic with me until we're live. I don't want to be prepared for anything, and at least that keeps me sharp, because that I'll have a confrontation. I can't prepare, so everything I come up with has to come up me and not from being able. Yes. And I learn from that, and that's so that's where I am. We'll see what happens. I should have had my co-host today, but that didn't work out due to technical problems. But we'll be together in a talk, and people seem to like what I do so far. I hope they'll like what I'm bringing in now.
Yeah, we're facing a very interesting situation with the proliferation of anti-evolutionism. That young Earth creationism.
It's becoming a nightmare.
And we've got way too many of them in cabinet positions already, or squishy semi-creationists who don't really. Rick Santorum is like that. You know, I don't think this guy would know a therapsid vertebrae from a crankshaft. But nevertheless, he's got the buzzwords knocking around. And so ultimately, it's a methodological question that bothers me, and it affects in other areas. Expect somebody who thinks that the pyramids were built as Joseph's grain silos to make informed decisions on people's housing projects. And that's Ben Carson. So bad methodology is coming to bite. This is the most pseudoscientific, most anti-science, most historically illiterate administration in history. There were some oddballs. If you remember, James Watt from the Reagan administration was a kind of an outlier, but they were relatively competent people. But this one is a one where it's harder to find the competent people in a train wreck of ideologues that are coming in there, because this is a culture camp friendly administration. And Trump doesn't bother too much about it. He just plays the buzzwords and goes down to the Family Research Council and does the bumper stickers, and then goes back to the golf course and the Golden Palaces and enjoys himself. But the rest of us are pick up the pieces. And some of the things that are happening at EPA and NOAA and the US Geological Survey and these other areas, or what happens, there's going to be pushback, I'm sure, against Betsy DeVos and her voucherism and homeschoolingism, but we're going to be seeing a pretty murky time here, and unless we can manage to move past Trumplandia. So it would be nice if we could have a rarefied world where we're only talking about the science and we're not talking about the politics, but unfortunately it's impossible to distinguish those because it's been that way all along. I could see this train wreck coming from the Jerry Falwell era. It's bitter fruits, as we've got illiterates of all type who think themselves knowledgeable. I'm sure with Imhoff, the climate change guy in the Senate from Oklahoma, And you've got some of the various representatives in Congress who have wackaloon ideas. The new guy from Montana underwrote the Creationism Museum, their dinosaur exhibit there down in, can't forget the name of it right off the bat. So it's right in front of us. To some extent, the NCSE has spent a little too much time observing the barn door after they're open, even kind of taking a look down below. And there's been a lot of grassroots reporting that really isn't always done from a methods point of view. So this is a bigger sea change. People need to ask methods-oriented questions more often to try to pin down not merely that some candidate for office has an opinion, but on what basis do they do that? Generally good to have more methods-based questions when we're dealing with anybody in office, and ideology down rather than source methods up. Does that sound reasonable to everybody?
Yes. Yeah, because right now we've got that particular religious group is in power, and it just bothers me when they can't even differentiate between, for simple things, between life insurance and health insurance. I mean, that alone is frightening enough. But to
a methodology failure, and if anybody thinks, oh, this use of primary sources versus secondary sources in fact checking is so boring and dreary and green eye shade, no, we're seeing exactly the reason why the train wrecks are happening is because of a source methods failure. And the people who could easily do that, you've got interest groups from the Heartland Institute in the case of climate change. You've got a variety of anti-evolution organizations that filter stuff into things that are all of them have their interest groups, and they have now political clout now in a way that they never had before. That's why President Trump, you'd get President Pence, and he's just as creepy in a different direction because he's a culture camp conservative. And this guy would leave the barn door open even more, because unlike Trump, who doesn't care a rat's ass about a lot of these issues, Pence does. And he would be willing to put his foot on the scale in a variety of ways that may or may not happen quite so overtly from Trump down as he's trying to figure out how to deal with the Russia scandal. A view in there, Paul, or are you our skepticism guy, or are you just nodding your head?
Yeah, I'm just listening to you. And
now we get a totally different perspective from our Dutch guy, Europe, and you have a completely different dynamic.
Isn't it possible that what's happening in the current administration, isn't it possible that it's just where the finances come from, that a lot of the more powerful and the more the richer religious organizations or maybe individuals are just making it happen that these people are being elected? Because
it plays a part, but only a part. What you see on the issue, we have to remember how decentralized the American system is, and that certainly is in the case of education. Although there is a Department of Education, for all practical purposes, all education is local. You have city school boards, county school boards, you have some state administrations. It isn't like in Europe or Paris, where Paris runs France. All of the education system is run from centralized authority. That's not what happens over here. And then you've got the deeply religious character. It's no coincidence that America is probably one of the most religious countries, because we don't have a theocratic system, so everybody gets to kind of believe what they want. And that has also been a long-standing tradition. You have a long-standing tradition of evangelicalism in the country, although I'm leery about using that word in this creationism context. Evangelicals are not culture camp conservative creationists.
Yeah, well, what I gathered, at least from what I've seen, is that education is primarily decided on what gets in the textbooks in Texas.
Yeah,
We
there is
have
that fact. Yeah, they have a
very
functional veto power on it. Texas and California are the two monster markets. And in fact, there are some fascinating papers that have been done that the very liberal California filter for a whole bunch of multiculturalism issues, and the highly conservative Texas has done stuff on climate and science and economic issues, and then they have to try to figure out how to produce this really bland, boring, data-free in the middle that will sell in both of those states. So it's been there have been Diane Ravitch and others have been criticizing about this for quite some time. And as somebody that say chips fall where they may issue, that the object of sound education is to give people really good information, and then they can work on it and learn method as to how they're supposed to do stuff. Both of those politicizations in our country have been troubling. And it gets into things.
And what I think is troubling is what you just mentioned, is the school boards where unqualified people are having a say in education, and to me, that's the most stupid way to go about it. Let people in the field decide what makes it in the textbooks.
Well, remember, in America, we've had a long intellectualism. This is something that didn't materialize overnight. It's been the public that we just don't. We're very leery of those fancy pants intellectuals who are trying to tell us common working people how to live our lives, and that is a streak that's as much of the American character as the Tsar will make everything all better in the Russian character, or let's not have peasant revolts. Context, in the Chinese context today, that there's an awful lot of history that flows on there that doesn't disappear even with regimes. Now, on the money aspect, it plays a part. You've got money bags conservatives like the Koch brothers. You have the Ranieri family who underwrites everybody from Dinesh D'Souza and Ann Coulter to the intelligent design movement. And one of the Ranieri brothers, as I snarked at Dinesh D'Souza about a while back, is one of the big bankrollers of the Occidental Quarterly, which is about the only journal I know of today that is pushing eugenics.
Oh,
a family that schizoidally is design and eugenics. Ah, well, there's a square to circle. And so they managed to have two wrong positions all at the same time. How surprising. That greases the skids. And there's an awful lot of just voluntary aspects in this thing. You've got lots of grassroots people around there. When Bill Nye had his debate with Ken Ham, the guy that made money out of it was Ken Ham, because his donations went up after the debate substantially. And probably one of the reasons why he was able to press further with his museum and his stupid art park, plus the fact that he was able to grease the skids with some sweetheart tax deals and the latest hijinks that just happened. But that's another issue. So yeah. I am looking.
He lost his tax deals today. So
the tax deal thing where he was trying to evade the tax. If there's no, new information.
Yes, they cut his 18 million tax rebate.
Oh.
So
yeah,
that stopped at the 12th last month.
Illustrating.
Going to get his 18 million.
Version of the welfare mother cliche,
yeah,
but
yeah, I thought Apologia just did a video about how the Ark got sold to one of Ken Ham's.
Yeah, that was $10. That's the latest.
Yeah,
wrinkle,
for
and $10
to the nonprofit part of it.
Yes.
So that now it's avoiding everything.
Any chance yet for that to be ruled on, and we'll see. And in fact, that apparently the county they're going to do a lot of maneuvers to try to get around taxes.
Ruled on. That has been ruled on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, good. I'll
because
I'll see some
because now he's
I haven't checked the internet.
He's violating.
So there is a God after all.
Yes, he's violating the rules that the tax-free base was revoking that. So 15 million that should have come in over a period of 10 years, he'll only get close to a year of that, and they now stop that effective the 28th of the last month.
But
so
that actually, that's the thing about the tax rebate in terms of a different thing. This, I think, was relating to another sales tax issue where they've tried to do a maneuver where he sold the park over to try to get that.
That's going to be the next step, because now they're going to look at things like the sales they have and profit they made, because it's now in the hand of a non-profit. So they'll likely be paying a lot more on taxes that they until now could evade. So,
but on the matter of money, I would contend that if the Amundsen family and the Koch brothers and a lot of these big money bags that underwrite a lot of creationist activities were raptured and sucked off of the planet, it still wouldn't make any of that go away. Certainly, if Ken Ham had to figure out how to make do on less than 150 grand salary a year, he would find a ways around it, because these are people driven by their ideology, their faith, their convictions. It helps if they can live a kind of a nice lifestyle based on it. I'd like that as a secularist, but I don't. So if I could get on that gravy train, I'm happy to do. I got a GoFundMe, and we're still hearing cricket sounds on that. But so I don't usually see the demographics in this area. Anti-evolutionism, standing foible. It was percolating under the surface at the time of the Scopes trial, and the reason why it came to a head was because there were changes in the educational system where you couldn't avoid it. And the big push in the 60s came because of the biological science curriculum system that put evolution back in the schools nationally after Sputnik, and boy, the sleeping giant woke up in a hurry. So the attitudes around there aren't really driven by economics. They may be abetted and enabled by a certain degree of economics, and the fact that you have this very conservative frame. Virtually all anti-evolutionists are culture camp conservative religious, and so they can easily go and do a speech in front of Tony Perkins's Family Research Council, and they can bump into a bunch of Chamber of Commerce types, and there will be a demographic that will flow back and forth. But the deep dynamic of why they believe it is not because of money they're receiving from upstream. These people will start up these little tiny museums out in the middle of nowhere where they're putting their little pictures up of dinosaurs and trying to put their little graphics up of the flood, and they may make enough money over time that they can actually build a fancier building and have grand plans for museums. There's one down in Boise that's trying to do that. There's dozens of these around the country. I, for a moment, do not think that they are just in it for the money, or that they would stop doing it on that basis. These are matters of conviction. This doesn't make them any less dangerous, especially if they can manage to squeak upstream into the political realm. And that's where we get into troubles. We need to be able to vet they get into office, not afterward. So more of the times where you ask people questions, it may sound rude. One immediate vetting question of asking anybody is, oh, by the way, how old do you think the Earth is? At the very least, that kind of puts people on the map. And some people may harumph about it, but others may hem and haw, and others may go, oh, I just don't think about that. And others will say, oh, well, 6,000 years, of course. And that the 6,000 years of course branch instantly is off the map. These should never be in political power under any circumstances, because they clearly have an ability to reign at the moment's notice or rely on secondary sources that are flawed at a moment's notice. And if that methods approach can be much more structured, I don't know to what extent this pops up in the European context in election campaigns and how well reporting does over there in Holland. Can you give us a clue on this, or are they as muddled up as we are over here.
You mean our politics?
Our politics?
Yeah, yeah. Do science questions or issues, policy matters, and how they arrive at stuff, are these things routinely asked of candidates that stand? You have like a parliamentary system in Holland?
Yes.
Okay,
and,
so that rather than a president.
Yes, but we also have our glitches. We have a guy I think is even more dangerous than Donald Trump is. So.
Oh yeah, well, there's a long-standing bit. Yes, every one of these. There are traditions of that kind of. Let's use the damn word, the crypto-fascists. That you find them are all around the place. So the one that is probably the most dangerous, because it is member of NATO, is Erdogan in Turkey, doing very bad for science.
He's
that scare the bejabbers out of me, and I'm running out of bejabbers at my age.
Yes, and he's setting up Turkey as so I think what he wants to become is just a dictator and get power.
Yeah,
and that's working fine.
Was one of the models of the secular state. It was set up as a secular state by what's his name back in the 1920s, and it's stayed that way up until very, very recently. And this is a reminder of the same lessons that we saw in the case of Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany or Stalin's Russia, was the fact that travel in a hurry, especially in times of stress. And the difficulty over the terrorism issue is just the kind of Reichstag fire moment to play off of things, and by fomenting fear and ignorance, very processes that cause the thing to begin with. And that means that we are in a time, I didn't think I would have to be living in a time like the 1920s and 1930s when a civilization almost unraveled in the world. That we're in that.
No.
And
I think there's another thing that comes into play, because it's not only that it's instilling fear, but it's also the populist who gets into power, and we have that here in Holland. I think Erdogan is doing exactly the same.
Yeah.
That's how Trump got elected. Just say what the people
barely past the precipice when Le Pen didn't get in.
No, they just say what the people want to hear, and if that's different every other day, as we have seen that happen with Trump,
the weather vane,
just making statements, 80 degrees turnaround in just a couple of hours, and that's people fall for that, and the less educated fall for that, and that's how people like that get into power.
Well, remember, Tortucanosity is not a matter of intellect. It's a matter of temperament. And I would contend that demagogues everywhere, and Trump in particular here in the United States, that's his demographic voter base. If you look at a very bright Tortucan like Dinesh D'Souza, this is a guy who has an absolutely infinite ability to rationalize things he doesn't want to think about. Addict, a superficial scholar. He sounds very intellectual. He puts intellectually footnotes in stuff. But in terms of his underlying methodology, the guy and Jeranism, the flat earth guy, are indistinguishable. And the point is that Jeranism is never going to be running for an office or supporting a big political candidate where he makes a difference. Whereas Dinesh D'Souza has a huge number of followers who think exactly like him. And I mean that not in terms of the content, the methodology, that they think just like him. They will rely on secondary sources. They won't fact check material. If any of you have been following me on Twitter, you can see me jousting with these people all the time. And I try to apply that methods approach all the time. And it's, people would ask me, are you thinking you're going to change these people's minds? Oh, they're Tortucans. They don't change their minds. I want the people who aren't Tortucans, who are observing the field, to see how the method is approached, how the sources need to be dealt with, how you push back on stuff. And if enough people start pushing back and enough people start interacting in ways and always have their case available so that they can have such a huge network of people in principle. Somebody somewhere knows the fact. And by exchanging that information much more rapidly, which we can do now electronically, we can do this instantaneously by talking about it. We can put tweets up and links up and be able to cross-connect information. We can up our game, presumably. We've got to up our game because the people who are behind Trump or the Erdogans and others have a lot of vested interest. They may have a great deal of money behind them. They have a lot of very dynamic social networks. The Coulter camp for their social networking. And we atheists are. We're like herding cats. We're terrible at it. We don't do indirect altruism easily. That Coulter camp religionists do effortlessly because it's all part of that leap of faith thing. So they have a built-in advantage that I think from an evolutionary selection pressure point of view explains why religions or things that function like religions have been so sustaining over cultures, because they manage to outcompete their opponents. They have their horrible downsides, but so long as the kind of outweighs the downside more than enough, that's a scorched earth defense system. So you can think, my shorthand definition of religion is it's a neotenous spandrel that is sustained as a scorched earth defense. Well, I just said.
Well, I think what you just said, it's fairly accurate, but it's not only us having the means to bring stuff out; they have the same means. And another thing you said, they're not stupid people, and that's why I said the uneducated, because there's a difference to being stupid and to have lacked a proper education. And that's where I think is where we should improve. If we can improve education, and if we can improve how people think and not just what they should think, I think that would be the only method to counter something like religion and pseudoscience and conspiracy theories, because they all come down to a lack of education. In my opinion, religion maybe not, because there's religion is, I think, more difficult to counter because people are growing up in religion. So I generally, when I talk to people, I always think that they are sincere in what they're telling me, and for I've done, they are. And what we sometimes forget is that if you are told from a very early age that there is a God, at some point in your life that God becomes as real as your family members, because you grew up with that idea. And it doesn't matter if there's no evidence, it doesn't matter if it's pure fantasy. At that point, it's 100% real to the person believing that. And I think
we'll create new gods even without the old ones. Probably a really interesting work to look at is the work of Hood on supersense idea, I think his name is. And Michael Shermer has built off a lot of his research that creates religion in people's minds is part of our natural cognitive architecture. We form patterns, we can't help it. And one of the things that we can manage is like a God pattern to explain big things. And another one has to do with intentionality. We impart intentionality to things very readily as a child. And eventually we kind of figure out that the bicycle isn't really feeling sad out in the rain. But the kinds of things that we impugn to spiritual and other realms never can quite. There's a natural inbuilt system that can generate superstition and magical and supersense thinking, independent of the religious indoctrination. So Hood's point is that if you manage to eliminate every trace of every religion on earth, The next generation is going to generate things that are going to function like that. And it's a certain degree of the overhead, the way we run brains, way of doing stuff. It's an uncomfortable thing for a lot of atheists to think about. There's been this scientism in particularly, where they think it's just a matter of education, and the more you have education, the less likely you'll be religious. And in many ways, that's partly true, but it doesn't eliminate it completely. And because we've got God modules, which will vary across the population. I think I don't have them particularly. And so for me, the kinds of memes that would resonate effectively in the head of your diligent or a belligerent Christian literally won't make an effect for me, because I'm operating in a different cognitive frame. And so you have to figure out the social way of doing that. One of the major things that puts a brake on people is that the state mustn't be allowed to enforce orthodoxy. Where things run off the rails, from the Spanish Inquisition to Hitler's Germany to the Soviet Union to the idiot up in North Korea today, they are a thing where the state can decide that things of conscience and things of individual belief, and you can be enforced to change your behavior and or belief, and we're going to keep you in a prison until you do so. The moment the state has that power, that's when things get into trouble, independent of the content of what it is they're trying to enforce. Of enlightenment sense of individual conscience and individual liberty, where you have government that engages in government-y things like building roads and building spaceships and doing health insurance, but not conceptual orthodoxy, is the thing that ought to be separating free thinkers and atheists and people of faith who are believers in enlightenment virtues versus ones that have that kind of culture war. Means we got to make sure everybody thinks correct. And an atheist telling somebody that they have to think correct can be just as dangerous as a religionist trying to tell you that you are to think correct, if you can use the state to enforce that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
go ahead.
I'm Wiccan for one thing, and I really dislike this anti-science movement, this anti-education movement. I'm also a pediatric critical care nurse. I've got experience with horse breeding. You know, I mean, I'm almost 50, so I've had a good long life, and what I keep trying to tell some of these Christians when I get into discussions with them is that you don't want to have this be a Christian government in the United States, because they're not going to pick your brand of Christianity. We're all going to suffer if the government dictates what we can believe and what we can't. And these people do not understand this.
Examples of groups that know what it feels like to be a persecuted religious minority, and they are ones who are very much opposed to state-mandated religious instruction or state-mandated orthodoxy, because they're a part of the minorities. Yeah. Once a general concept is for everybody to remember a minority. Every bloody Christian together in one gigantic blob, you still got 2.6 billion people. That means 4.4 billion non-Christians.
Yeah.
So every religious faith in a minority faith, and always has been, and probably always will be, if you can't enforce religious orthodoxy. So the idea is, how do you live together? I imagine I would have as much criticism of Wiccan as I would of Christianity. But we move beyond that when we look at what a civil society does.
Yep.
Up to me to tell you what your philosophy of life is in that respect. But when you talk about, say, how you deal with how you're supposed to treat horses in a context, or pediatrics, there we're talking science, and it don't make diddly squat difference what your religion philosophy should be.
I mean, the chemistry involved in pharmacology is going to work regardless what, you know, because that's science-based. And I don't know why I'm getting an echo there.
Oh, well, it pops up every once in a while. It's the Dutch demon god that pops up. That's it. We'll blame it on.
No, anyway, I get just as frustrated with the anti-medicine groups and the anti-vaxxers and everything else, because they've tried to demonize science and scientific thought and what all has gone into it, and they're just going off
they can be
somewhere.
A very demographic. The anti-vaxxers are much more likely to be Marin County liberals, as they are a culture camp conservative. And so that once you get past the idea that there's a single group that has this like monopoly on thinking badly, instead look at everything from a methods point of view, where everybody has to sink or swim based upon and how they construct an argument fairly. Then you can move in, and now you can start seeing a whole bunch of different ones that are problematic. It bothers me that the one, I can't remember if it was in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, the little younger Kennedy guy, he's on that anti-vaxxer gig, and I'm going, ay, ay, ay.
Oh, yeah. And it's getting to where, you know, I forgot if it was Pat Robertson or who it was, the quiet atheist had just done something about where they're demonizing education in general. You know, that going to college is bad. It's going to turn your young men into transgenders. And yeah, it was Pat Robertson recently.
There's no limit to the list of Pat Robertson stupid.
No, there isn't.
Well,
he preached stupid,
and he's not the only one, because Ken Ham is posing exactly the same.
Oh, well, from that perspective, you see,
and that's why Ken Ham is now starting a school of his own, which I think is even more dangerous.
Falls into that thing. You found the same kind of, to show you how weird things can be. It's always hilarious when I like to remind people that another group that was extremely vehemently homophobic were communists. Marxist dogma. Yipes! Heavens! Atheist guy just kind of suddenly, but Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell's kid was gay on it because he was from a very leftist perspective. You can still see. You've seen Spartacus. Yeah, that was written by Dalton Trumbo, who was a blacklisted communist for a while, and the novel was from Howard Fast. It's very leftist. It embodies Marxist philosophy of life. You'll notice who's the most heterosexual people on earth in the tale. It's the slaves. And then the one that when you move up to Gracchus, the character that was played ironically by the gay Charles Laughton, that was the patrician womanizer. But he was kind of the good patrician, but he was kind of sexy and he would have affairs with people and so forth. Then the creepy guy up on top, the super patrician, Laurence Olivier, Crackus, he was bisexual. And it's the one matter of bisexuality in the entire story. This was just extraordinarily incendiary in 1960, and the scene was cut out of the movie and was only put back in during the reissue and all that. But that's all very much within that frame. In Marxist ideology, and you still find it with Richard Lewontin on promiscuous sex and all that, because he's a doctrinal Marxist. But that they thought that homosexuality came about as a product of capitalism, and in the socialist utopia to come, none of that would happen because everybody would be living a happy heterosexual life in the socialist perfect communist state. And you're going, what? Same way as the guy in Iran, Prime Minister of Iran there, that was saying, no, there's no homosexuality in Iran. We're Muslims. That just cannot happen in our society. And you're going, I'm terribly sorry, but that's not how it works. Just as a truth and disclosure thing, I happen to be an old gay man. So I have kind of spotted all of this before. Like I would keep a long trail refusal of Star Trek to ever put a gay character in, where no man has ever gone before. There would be one again and again and again, and 7 of 9 was going to be a lesbian character, I think, for a while. The one little guy on Voyager, The other guy, the little Asian guy, was going to be a gay character in that too, and they would always step back from it. And the reason is because Universal or Paramount and all that were just terrified of the demographics, because there's an awful lot of very conservative Christian people who are Star Trek fans. And they just didn't want to step on that third rail. They could get close to a tippy-toe with lesbian sex. So there were a lot of lesbian interactions over the years, and they were kind of scandalous. But the idea of two guys going at it, no, that was that they could have the Ferengi, who was randy for absolutely anything in skirts other than his own species. Bestiality in that respect is not a problem, and yet two guys from the same species can't quite manage it in the Star Trek world in the 23rd century. That shows you how timorous they are, and they may finally be able to do it. Maybe there'll be something in that realm in that new CBS. Unfortunately, I won't be able to get to see because it's on their paid version that's coming up, the all access thing.
No.
I'm not holding my breath on all that kind of stuff. But these are always measurements. Oh, by the way, I was always amused too when the ones that were saying there's just too many gays. There's gays showing up on all the damn shows. And somebody did a survey where they looked through, and it turns out it's about 5%, which is at roughly the limit of the population. So it just is that you went from 0 to noticeable. There were always gays on television. I mean, Paul Lynde and all these other people were right there, and some of our most entertaining folks. And ironically, my poor homophobic mom, her favorite actors were actually gay. She loved, and I'm not making this up, Monty Woolley, Joan Navarro, who she had a crush on. It's the reason my brother was named Raymond, and Raymond Burr, and I just mentioned him. Yeah, I think his name right, from Spartacus, and all of them were gay.
Yeah,
Monty
my
Woolley
mom's
used to
was Rock Hudson, and I was just watching Mystery Science Theater 3000 with a bad Rock Hudson flick last night. But yeah,
and the kind of ones that had to hide their homosexuality, probably one of the most fascinating cases was Raymond Burr. He had an intriguing creationist mind. He was the pudgy kid from Canada who got a bit of a film career, and then he got the big role of his life, which was to play Perry Mason, and he was incomparable. Everybody was just exactly right in that television series. But he had a tendency to kind of make up an imaginary backstory for himself. So he would allude to a fictitious military career he never had. He never made a big deal out of it, but he would often allude to it. It's a little bit like Rachel Dolezal from, if you remember her case about the white woman at the NAACP who was pretending to be black, and there was a big flap over it.
Oh, yeah.
She's from Spokane. And I discovered, to my fascination, really kind of explained a bit about her, because she was raised in an extremely abusive creationist background. Very hard-ass, nasty, hard-going parents, doctrinal creationists. And I think what it was is she escaped, invent a new persona, a new culture for herself, kind of went overboard with it. A little bit like what was going on with Raymond Burr, because both of them were extremely competent people. She was highly admired in the local NAACP here, because it got covered a lot because, you know, it's from Spokane and I live in Spokane. So I had kind of a closer connection to it than a lot of people who were just looking at it from the media from 900 miles away might not have realized. So what she did was, in an eerie sort of way, understandable and predictable given the kind of background. Because in a way, don't we all create personas about ourselves? We invent what we're seeing versus what we see in our personal life and public realm, and the various things we put on. To some extent, Trump has a degree of persona where a lot of people commented that he was not that unlikable a guy 20 years ago. But now he puts on this exaggerated element that he can't seem to get himself out of. He doesn't seem to have any friends. And as somebody who doesn't have a lot of people showing up, I can kind of appreciate that as well. He's slightly older than I am.
Can I add something, James? because someone threw that up in the chat, and that's actually something that I'm curious about. What did they think of Liberace?
Oh, he was a fascinating character, and indeed, I loved the show that was done just recently on him with Matt Damon playing the little love interest. He was a character that more to dislike about him than to like about him. The opposite of Raymond Burr, because Raymond Burr, people who knew him adored him, and he was the most loyal, kind, friendly person. People would walk through fire for the guy, and he would walk through fire for them. He constantly saved people. But Liberace was sad, angry, the fact that he tried to make his lover into a miniature mini-me of himself, having to do makeup, of surgery and stuff. He was a far more complex and sad character, a serial comic that Raymond Burr isn't.
Yes, what I'm pointing to is that if anyone was gay, openly gay, that was Liberace. I mean,
to kind of slide along for years, but for an awful long time, people that had the sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge quality about stuff. And there were a lot of characters in the industry where people always kind of looked the other way. Everybody knew about it, but they didn't care. If you got to the movie star status, provided you pretended to have a girlfriend or you got married, you went through the motions and you made sure that the publicity department controlled stuff, it was pretty much okay. Well, Raymond Burr kind of bumped into things. There was a bit where they had kind of a run-in with things and they had to kind of cover it up. And then if you've ever seen if you have the DVD, the extended edition of DVD of Giant that Rock Hudson was in, there's a whole show of the Contagious Theater or wherever, where the Los Angeles premiere was. And Raymond Burr showed up, and he was there with, I think, a girl on his thing, and he was talking about how wonderful the movie was going to be and so forth and so on. And only later, when I read the biography of him, did I discover that the little Coast Guard guy in the uniform right behind him was the gay guy he had picked up down at the pier and had brought him to the premiere of the movie as his little squeeze of the night. And there's when you find out about it, you're going, clang. It's I went back and I had to put the DVD on to look at this, and I'm looking through and I go, holy shit, there he is. And he's kind of looking kind of nervous and frustrated, like, what the hell am I doing here? Because he's off to the side. But Rock Hudson had to kind of keep things very, very on the down low. Yeah. Liberace is a troubling, complex personality. What? An okay pianist. He had a troubled relationship with his brother in that as well, George. And he's the sort that you would have to say, this guy has got issues in a way that you wouldn't Raymond Burr, who had things he had to deal with, but nonetheless was a remarkably exemplary character. He would stick by people so much. The fellow that played the district attorney into a pot party, wild party up in the Hollywood Hills, and it got raided by the police. And CBS went ballistic and fired him from the show, or suspended him. Around him, there were a whole bunch of some other prosecutor for the week for like about 5 or 6 months. And maybe because of his own inner nature, that he knew the hidden life that you can go to and what you had to leave, he really fought hard, and he got Tolman put back on the show as the district attorney. He managed to maneuver, because the show by then was getting so incredibly popular that he had clout. It was beating out Bonanza for a while, and until more people bought color sets. And then later on, when Tolman cigarette smoking, lung cancer problem, he made sure that he kept on the show, and he did the same thing with the guy that played the district attorney, or the chief, Lieutenant Tragg. He had a relatively fragile health in the end, but he made sure that he had positions on the show that he could do little short light work check. And everybody who worked around him, who knew him, just absolutely would walk over hot coals for him because they knew you were his friend and he was yours, and they just adored him. There doesn't seem to be much of that with Liberace. And a user and a troubling manipulator. And yeah. So anyway, that's my take on Liberace.
Okay. I have to say it has been fun, but I have to go. I'm on this now for I think 7.5 hours that I've been on different streams, phone calls. So,
there's a life you have to go back to.
yes. Well,
there's real life.
Everything came.
Everything. Fugue.
That darned real life gets in the way all the time.
Thank you for joining in. Thank you for listening to the earlier thing with Jackson, because he's a bright kid. I think it was an interesting discussion, and thank you for showing up here, and hope you show up again in what hopefully will be more of my live feeds times when I get my bee in my bonnet and I get going on the after show. We still got some people in here. Anybody else want to jump in out there?
Oh gosh, I totally forgot about the live chat. Sorry.
Yeah, there's you knocking around.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Au revoir. What is bye in Dutch? Maybe it's a version of Guten Tag, because Dutch is a Germanic language, so it's probably very similar to it. When I do read Dutch material occasionally, when I happen to stumble upon it accidentally, it looks like a German that went through a blender. And I can't quite make it out because it's enough different in the way that it's spelled because of the root formula. In the same way, when you read Chaucer and stuff back in the 12th century, when you get over the spelling conventions, it's really conventional German.
Yeah.
In that mode for quite a long time, and still we started boinking the Norse kids, and had to change the language and turn it into the a word order language that we all love today as modern day English, or I should say American English, the lingua franca of our time, which is taking over. Is the universal world language. Ha! Take that, French.
My mom, who is very much German, was always like, I hated French as talking with marbles in my mouth, and then I dated a German guy for a while who said the same thing.
I still don't know how I managed it. Maybe because I'm such a shy wallflower in Latin, I just brazened it through. But you're supposed to have some foreign language before you got into college when I went to Eastern. But I had never taken any language courses at all in high school. I remember, I think it was that they let me squeak in because I had like a 4.0 grade average. And so I had to take a language when I got to college. And so I was walking by the thing and I was hearing the Guten Tag and all that from the Germans, and then I was hearing the and I go, I don't want to make my tongue do that. No. So I decided to take German.
Yeah, you sound more like you're spitting from the back of your throat, Well,
then there's Klingon, of course, which is that it's the throat clearing language that people play. And there are worse languages to do because from what I understand from my nephew who took Japanese, it's an extremely inflected language. And of course, Russian is a very inflected language in the same way Latin and all that is. German was kind of a training wheel language. French apparently structurally is still very much like Latin. But the fact that the weirdness of some of the stuff in French, when I found out that they don't say 99, 20s and 19. I go, what language can do something that stupid? At least the Germans would say 99, but we just packed everything. But it did reveal to me a lot. It's structurally very distinctive from the way English formed up. English became a verb word order language that got rid of all the inflections for a variety of reasons. But the Germans have these weird caboose format verb structures. So you would say, I go to the store. And by the way, they don't actually have the progressive form in German at all. So we have a distinction between I am going to the store and I go to the store. If I say I am going to the store, it's like imminent. If I say I go to the store, that would be like saying, do you go to the store? Yeah, I go to the store. It's something you're not actually doing now. The Germans have no such distinction.
Yeah.
So they have only the idea. And then, so if I go to the store, it's let's see, go to the store have, go to the store shall have, that they put all the additional, or no, they put the gain in the end. Yes, ich soll, yes, I should to the store gone have would be how they would be saying it. So you complex sentences in German that would drive me nuts. You would have this teaser verb at the beginning of the sentence that kind of hints at something happening, and then this pile up of nouns and adjectives and stuff, and then this train wreck when you finally find out what the hell happened at the end, which is exactly the opposite of English, because you get all of your verbs in a big front, and then you find out what you do with them. So it's dynamically entirely different. And I can't help but think, and some modern linguists are starting to think about the fact that this will affect kind of how you construct your worldview too, because you've got a different way of building things. Even in deeper in terms of cognitive theory, the thing Steven Pinker has mentioned this a lot of times in his work, is that why do we say it's a big red ball, not a red big ball? And so there seem to be like hierarchies that occur naturally in terms of the way modifiers work, as in color and other dimensions. And I'm inclined to think, and I don't think there's been enough work yet done on the cognitive literature to settle the issue, but I suspect it has to do with the prioritization of the signal stream in the visual processing and the auditory processing and the other bits, so that the stuff that's coming in the stream in one order gets first priority. And that's why a big red ball sounds okay, but a red big ball sounds kind of odd, because it's the opposite order from what we do. Synesthesia comes up too, because the ones that can see colors when they hear words and stuff, it turns out that the brain systems that generate those are adjacent in the brain, and so they form crosstalk. And that's why they're getting the synesthesiacs. But then an idea occurred to me, and no way yet to test it out because we don't have brain endocasts of Australopithecines. But it occurs to me the conclusion that synesthesia is a malfunction of the brain system originally, and we just have evolved away from it, where we've disconnected synesthesic connections because we've started to over-specialize the brain with language and a whole bunch of other stuff. So we don't know whether if an Australopithecine were shown one of the eye test charts, gibberish, but they would also see colors along with the images. Yeah. Because they might have been naturally synesthesic, and that didn't have an overly specialized brain, but we do. No, it's a toss-up on my part, but it's the romantic in me to think that there might have been a synesthesic element in our earlier history that we've forgotten about because we become highly specialized in our brain centers. Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. That'd be kind of cool to I wish there was a way we could find out, you know, is the synesthesia something that is just showing up now because it's glitching in our modern brain, or is it a throwback from our past?
When they learn more about the genes that govern them, they may be able to do phylogenetic analyses that way. We know other areas. There are brain endocasts of Homo habilis, and they've got Broca's area and Wernicke's area, which are later used in our brains as language processing systems, among other things. And so we can presume not necessarily that Homo habilis had articulate speech, but that the substrates that eventually turn into that speech are eventually in the case. And they're just now getting to the full-blown MRI examples where they can start figuring out beyond just, there's one brain system that kind of specializes in verbs and another one with nouns. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's really tough is why the grammatical sentence structure. That stuff that is now putting Noam Chomsky in the caboose, because he was looking at it before the neurobiology era and does not seem to be terribly interested in looking at that side of it. That's going to be really intriguing. And then the other I have as a concept is, are there other ways to have, air quotes, grammatical structure other than what we're used to. And particularly, I'm thinking cetacean intelligence, because their brains are on a completely different sighting that's been millions and millions and millions of years removed from ours in terms of the artiodactyls versus us coming down through the little primate bunch. And we can't imagine the kinds of connections that could be going on in their heads. We know that dolphins, for example, their brains sleep one half at a time. Essentially shut down almost all the brain, and or at least the conscious part, and then do our little mode program updates, and we get all these weird REM states and all of that.
Yep.
Whereas your dolphin is always awake, but part of the brain is shut down, and then the other one, it comes back on, and then the other one shuts down for mode program updating. It must have a very different. My theory is that any advanced sentient self-aware being has effectively a movie in the brain. In the movie in the brain depends on your sensory modalities. We don't hear ultrasonic sounds. We don't see ultraviolet. Birds do, so that when you discover that a lot of bird plumage is just screaming in the ultraviolet, that it look like nothing, but it's incredibly visible in them. I'm assuming that in the little bird brain, they're seeing a different color balance in their movie in the brain. Really throws you off are the cetaceans with and bats, both of those who echolocate.
Yeah.
Because my suspicion is dolphin comes up and goes and can literally see the fish that's hiding underneath the dirt, bottom of the riverbed. That it's getting that in the movie in the brain overlay, where it's simultaneously seeing the physical world up above and all of those acoustic things as part of its movie in the brain. We can't imagine how that puts together, although I imagine you could have an artist who could theoretically do something that would be kind of like an analog to it, in the same way that a tesseract is a representation of the shadow of a four-dimensional hypercube in three-dimensional space. You can get that as kind of an idea of it. And this, the grammatical structure area, because one of the guys, oh gosh, I can't remember his name right off the bat, but he's a nice skeptic, rationalist fellow. He's dumped on creationists and so forth, but he also dumped on cetacean intelligence research and language research. And basically he was saying, you know, as far as we can tell, the dolphins are saying, hi, I'm Susie, and that's, you know, it's the equivalent of the little name tag you put on at the convention. It's just nothing. Maybe not, because I was immediately reminded of an episode from Star Trek The Next Generation where Captain Picard was beamed down and stranded on a planet where there was this alien who he found that the translator wouldn't work with him, seeming gibberish. There were intelligible fragments of sentences, but they couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. And it finally dawned on him that these aliens' brains spoke in metaphors. And once he understood the metaphor, the translator would work effectively when he realized that it was totally architecturally different from what we're used to. So the idea is that the cetacean brain has developed a whole different series of hierarchical things and movie in the brain segments and all of that at a grammatical structure that involves elements we can't even imagine. That a dolphin can't do is whisper. Everything is open. It's all... And so it may be there was a situation where something is context sensitive, where if you say, hi, I'm Susie, with your eyeball pointed that way, versus hi, I'm Susie with this direction, or hi, I'm Susie, hours from the last time you said something to somebody else, it means something different than what it does now. All we're getting is the hi, I'm Susie level, all of those cross connections, in the same way the dolphin can't imagine that we have things called direct objects and modifiers and adverbs that use acoustic waves to modify the content of something and can put together a sentence like, you had better start thinking about doing something about getting the tire blown up. That they wouldn't even be able to imagine that. To do a translation from dolphinese to human or vice versa, because the underlying grammatical architecture is literally incompatible.
Yep.
It's like trying to put your beta video cassette into the VHS player or your DVD player into your CD player, DV into the CBD player.
Yeah, my husband and I were actually having kind of a similar discussion last night about that sort of thing, because we got into talking about the octopus brains and how, you know, each tentacle on the octopus has its own operating brain. So here there's these people that have been eating raw octopus, and it's climbing back out again and strangling them, and they're dying from this. And
well, that's distributed intelligence. And we know that octopi have a remarkable ability to like open puzzles and things. And apparently are able to do unbelievably sophisticated chromatophore shifts without having color vision, although it's turning out that we forgot that their eyes aren't their only sensory system, that they're actually sort of chromatophorish things that are eyeball-y bits that are able to pick up on some of this stuff in addition to it, which is why, you know, you got to do the research and you find out, yeah, things are more interesting than you thought, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That was just, we had a good long discussion about that, because it's like, but this is just wild, you know? And related to dolphins too, they actually will take the octopus by the head and smash it against something to bust the tentacles off. They eat the head first, and it's not to be cruel. It's they wait for the tentacles to stop moving, and then they eat them so that they don't have the same problem of getting strangulated.
This was, did you ever read Gödel, Escher, Bach?
No, I haven't.
Douglas Hofstadter's giant book. It's a life changer, although I can easily see why a lot of people go, you expect me to read this thing? It's huge. But it's an amazing work. It's about Gödel, the mathematician, which is self-recursivity issues and undecidable propositions and a whole bunch of other stuff. Bach, which is the idea of fugues and musical structure and harmonic relationships and why we have music and blah, blah, blah. And Escher, the wonderful surrealist painter, where we'd have figures walking up and down with things that are going all over the place and strange. And they're all basically talking about some of the same things from totally different angles. Incredibly intricate tap dance, which goes into everything from cognition and language structure and DNA and the origin of life, you know, a whole bunch of it. The idea that differential systems take on a whole life of their own. And one of the issues that came up is, could an ant colony be self-aware, even though there's no ant brain? That it can be intelligent. We now know, in fact, there is nobody in charge of an ant colony. The queen is not in charge of the ant colony. The queen is just the specialized segment that generates all the little pieces. But every ant is basically doing its own little thing and exchanging information back and forth through its little pheromones and engaging in fantastically complicated behavior. If you look at an army ant bivouac, and yet, how do you do that? Well, isn't that kind of an analog of the idea that we have a bunch of individual neurons in the brain, each doing their own little neurony thing, and yet it ends up producing a movie in the brain, and we think there's a me in here. Yeah. And so could there be something that's comparable to that in an ant colony? And the answer is, I don't know. But boy, it's an intriguing thought, and it alters what our definition is, and it relates to machine intelligence and artificial intelligence and distributed intelligence, and which are now increasingly becoming less abstract issues as we move into the post-Newton era of machines. Have you ever noticed, if you're an older person, not as old as I am, but nevertheless you will remember this constant line drawing? Well, computers can do some things, but they'll never win a chess game against a grandmaster. No, well, they'll never manage to do poker. Well, they'll never manage to do Go. That's too complicated. Only master. Well, they'll never manage to. I just keep on moving that line.
I got my computer science degree before I got my RN degree, and when I was 11, I was programming on a PET because we had this special program going through my school, and I've been involved with computers since then. And yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because my old My high school computer in the class, I was hooked up to a teletype machine and communicating via the teletype. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
See,
I can't
in
imagine
principle,
this now, you know. It's just
you can
insane.
theoretically make a computer that's composed entirely of pipes.
Yeah.
It would be slow as molasses, but it would still be a Turing machine if it functioned isomorphically to it. You'd have the slowest damn processor you could possibly imagine, but in the same sense that it able to do complex graphics if you had enough pipes. I wouldn't expect you to be able to do it very quickly, but nevertheless, so that calls into question our whole notion to have information, what it means to have self-awareness, and a lot of the other things that we unique human characteristics, it's probably an unresolvable question because it's a qualia issue, but might not be an unresolvable question if we can find some stage in which you seriously have an artificial intelligence that apparently is self-aware and can pass a Turing test. And then my suspicion would be that it would be one that has in effect emulated the things that allowed us to be self-aware. Input.
Yeah.
We have to have fairly reliable sensory input. We have to have multiple differentiated systems that can somehow kind of feedback loop on each other. And that, I think, is where self-awareness comes in. And we have to have something that is the counterpart of language, turning into, by the way, I'm illustrating an interesting point inadvertently, because one of the big brain systems that we do know we use for our speech systems is not primate uses for vocal calls. It's mainly the neural circuitry that primates use for gesturing.
Oh, wow.
Is not a metaphor. And in effect, what we've got is really vocalized mime. And so one of the interesting hypotheses that I've been following to see how it plays out or not in the neuroscience literature is whether language actually did operate nonverbal context. And if so, girding of it may have come about way before we had effective larynxes and a lot of the acoustic signaling. So this is a very interesting ongoing problem. You see, I'm fascinated with so many things that I became fascinated with because I cover almost everything in the #TIP project, which I hope more people will look at and read and support and buy my damn books. I did sell 2 more copies of my books yesterday. That was something. I would like to have everyone in the world have Slam Dunk and Paralogs of Phileas Fogg. But I'll settle for $1 million. I'm okay
Well,
with that.
I have to wait till I'm working my second job again before I can repatron with Steve and with you. And, you know, that's my plan there. But when you talked about the books the first time, I'm definitely interested. But that's just the healthcare company I work for closed. So
a lot. Oh, well, and again, I said, and I'm on retiree. That's why I had to do the GoFundMe and the Patreon thing. And unfortunately, our side, that secondary altruism thing, very easily, which is why we get by Breitbart and the creationists and that who funnel money to themselves at an astonishing speed. But I'm very proud of both of the books. I was surprised that I could really do a nice novel, but it just gushed out of my head and I couldn't quite get past it. That I couldn't let it stop. And I'm currently working on the sequel, in fact. I basically got kind of like a format if I can stay alive long enough to keep at it. So I did the Paralogs novel, and that's how I figured out how to do the self-publishing shtick. Okay, now I can do a new work that will be just science-oriented, that will be, because I've been told by a bunch of people, if the GoFundMe ain't doing well, which it wasn't, material in and make a book that you have to buy. And I didn't want to just take something I already had posted and just monetize it because I think that's a cheat. It needed to be a new work. So I thought, what has been covered? The effing reptile mammal transition. Nobody has done a work on that properly before. So I did Slam Dunk. which, as Christine Janis, the paleontologist, said, is an incredible tour de force, filled full of science information that's causing her to revise her new mammal book. So la-di-da.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I was gobsmacked when I found that out, because it was showing us what connection networks are and how I had to prod people, because she had known about my work for years, had never contacted me, and she had bought my book on her own. And then oh, James Downer, he's the guy that gave me the friend request on Facebook that I'd never answered. So click, she got the and I've got this book and all that stuff. And she says, oh, I know all about that. I have that. It's excellent.
Oh, wow.
Could you put a review of that up on Amazon to tell other people about that? And so I had to prod her quite a few times to do it. And that shows you how people get in the insular little bubble that from their point of view, it's not a big deal. But excuse me, for me, to tell people about that, thank you very much. And
Yeah.
spread on. So anyway, once I had Slam Dunk done, then my brain kind of gear shifted. And now I'm into doing a second Fog novel. And then doing background data storage, because there's a huge, massive material that I'd collected for TIP from about 2005 to 2009 that I never put in the bibliography, because I for one thing, I couldn't, because I was up against the 1.4 megabyte floppy disk size. I couldn't save my bibliography. It got much bigger.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and so I was up against the thing where I was going, why should I even? We're really getting close to the limit of working on it. So if I revised any of the other stuff, they were going to shoot over the thing, and I couldn't save any of my files on an independent. So I put everything on the side, and I was still collecting information. I just never did anything with it. It just made up in stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of fire hazards in my basement. In 2009, I think my computer died or whatever, and I went and got a new computer. Times had changed. Now we had gigabyte hard drives and gigabyte flash drives, and suddenly that 0.4 megs is gone. So that means I could now expand. And to show you how I went, the old tip material that you'll find on my website had about 5,000 some odd sources in it, and a couple thousand technical papers. I don't know exactly, because I didn't keep that close a track. I kept a number of the total sources just for referencing. And so that was 2005. And I started again. And from then, now I was doing my spreadsheet analysis that turned into all my meta-analysis stuff. That's gone from 5,500 sources to 57,000.
Oh, wow.
And from a couple thousand technical papers to 21,000 technical papers. And from hard to tell how many, maybe 500 anti-evolution sources to 8,000 written by 2,000 people. In other words, I've got a grip field that's vastly larger, and then something else, which I couldn't have done slam dunk 10 years ago. I probably couldn't have even done it 5 years ago. And that's because I wouldn't have had access to the primary sources. Whereas now, easily 90% of the material I need to get, I've been able to get free online.
Yeah.
Which for an impoverished writer, and I'm able to pull people to shreds. What I do to Michael Denton, oh boy, if they ever start noticing what I just did to Michael Denton in Slam Dunk, they're not going to like it. But you see, I'm too far below the food chain at the moment. To them when I bump into Denton isn't on Twitter, but David Klinghoffer is. Luskin used to be, but not anymore. I have a rationale behind how I handle the whole TIP project, because I found Twitter actually more useful than Facebook. There's a lot more people, and what I can do is I'm looking at any of the scientists that are in my bibliography that are on Twitter, acting as little spider webs. They're giving me heads up on the latest work in their field. So I'm able to get stuff that I wouldn't be able to necessarily hit until way downstream. Then I'm also making it a matter of looking at the upper level anti-evolutionists. A chunk of them, Kent Hovind and Eric Hovind are both on Twitter. AIG is on Twitter. ICR posts occasionally on Twitter. Discovery Institute does as an institution. as do Klinghoffer individually, Denise O'Leary and Nancy Piercy once in a while. And so gradually, whenever I see them up, I go follow and keep track of them. Then the other, your Richard Dawkinses, your DeGrasse Tysons, your Bill Nyes, and the National Center for Science Education gang, and all of that. And since I'm following them, and I'm following the creationists, thing that isn't happening, and that is our pro-science defense side are not pushing back against the anti-evolutionists on Twitter. So that however many posts they put up, I'm sure somebody is monitoring it. They're paying attention in the sense that they're taking note of what's passing on Twitter, but they're not actively engaging. Now, SciStrike and I both shoot our mouths off against Answers in Genesis. And so they'll put up some little post, and I'll see often SciStrike has come in and with this obligatory jackass at the end. And I'll put some of my little comments up there as well. But I'm actually looking at the stuff because I'll click on it, ones where they're talking about science issues rather than theology. And I will then immediately check to see in my reference bibliography. And it's citing technical information, it needs to be. So, whoop, I get that thing, and I look up the sources, and I track down them, and I do research on the additional issues and that. So it's all part of the bit, is that over time, this will become a completely, totally comprehensive mapping, anti-evolution usage of primary source science data, and covering exactly why it's wrong if I can keep at it long enough. And so Slam Dunk is the first kid off the block on there, where all examples of anti-evolutionists, people mentioning it on Twitter, but just actually writing books and articles and so forth on it, who have ever gone after the reptile-mammal transition. It's a small bunch. It's only about 20 people. And it's pretty pathetic, too, when you look at it. And discuss all of the relevant technical information. So anybody reading the book has got the ultimate brick, because anybody says, oh, there's no evidence for macroevolution, you can say, oh, sorry, the reptile-mammal transition. Yeah. If they start pushing back on it, if you've read Slam Dunk, you will know all the facts, and you will know every possible counter argument that they could offer. You'll know everybody, because you'll already have seen them blown to smithereens in Slam Dunk. So if they try to trot out John Woodmore at Answers in Genesis, or try to imply that, Steve Meyer's Explore Evolution went into that, oh, you want to bet? You've got the material covered. And in principle, we should have that for everything. We have to be dependent on old stuff at Talk Origins that's now some of it's decades old. That's not good enough. We have too much information available directly, and it can be interconnected effectively if we figure out how to make our connections properly. And we need to push back. Now, the object is not to persuade the creationists. That's not the object. It's to bear witness publicly, to not allow them to be able to make their little woo without somebody noticing it. Well, the people that might be following it, that might be fence straddlers and that, will go, oh, I didn't know that part. Oh, yeah. And then they will follow through and maybe part their network and find connections that they didn't before and all that. That's my goal. Yeah.
Can I butt in here for a second?
Absolutely. You should have said shut up, Jim, a long time ago.
I've seen a couple, Kent Hovind has been popping up lately doing these kind of these Google chat things, and he's been doing these debates.
Yeah, he's gotten really verbose.
He did one with King Crocoduck, and then there was some other guy.
And he did stuff on several ones that I've seen with him with other people. Bill Ludlow cleaned his clocks.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy. I think there's a few things he could have talked about, but he was really good. Do you think you might do something like that?
Duh. Oh yeah, I have. What's so ironic is I have been asked repeatedly, would you debate somebody? And I go, duh, set it up. And then they'll often kind of fiddle fart around about it. There was a guy that gave a lecture here, and his associate was giving the, oh, would you like to debate? Because they were talking with me. I says, duh. Casey Luskin, Steve Meyer, any of those over on the coast, but they could never quite get it organized. And it would be probably harder to get some of them. But quite a few of them is a dull sack of hammers, but incredibly arrogant, hyper-confident.
Mm-hmm.
Got the
Yeah,
gift of
he has
gab.
a sort of, yeah, exactly. He's got the used car salesman kind of.
And he was like this when I talked to him on the phone, his dime, fortunately, back in the 1990s. He hasn't changed one iota, and some of his pattern hasn't changed one iota. So if that's why Ludlow did such a good job, because if you actually follow his work, he's not very original. He's got the same shtick over and over again, and you can have your things where he literally had the PowerPoint slide ready to go. You know, this is a guy that did his homework. The one area where I would have been more wanting to press him is on Hovind's own source base. When he'll be making accusations, and he'll say, gosh, Kent, where did you get that information from? Can you have a source on that? And by the way, how did you fact check it? Because I would be intrigued to say whether how he would try to brazen around that. So far, creationists are honest people. They will never make up a non-existent source, repeat stuff they believe are true, or openly admit to having fact-checked something when they never did. They will just shut up instead, because they won't bear false witness on it. And I'll be intrigued to see whether Hovind how he would be able to tap dance around that source methods issue. Of the 8,000 sources that I have in my reference bibliography, I am relatively well read on the material. So I probably read more creationism crap than they have. A lot. Some people. I mean, in fact, my sister asked me one time, says, how in the hell can you read so many damn Philip Johnson books? She tried to plow through one of them that I lent her for a while, and she said, this is boring. And I go, of course it's boring. It's the same junk over and over again. The point. It's to get the field of what they have done as their argument.
Yeah, I agree.
So from a methodological...
few people study the creationist side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I have the problem of it just makes me angry, because I try to, even like listening to Kent debate Bill, it was like Bill was so clear and concise, and same thing with King Crocodile. I had physics in high school and in college and stuff, and Casey brought back so much stuff I had forgotten, and it was so simple, and Kent still couldn't get it or didn't want to get it, because then people would realize it was a false narrative, and I was yelling.
It's bouncing off the shell. This is perfectly understandable, because he has an apologetic thread, and you'll notice how often Hudlow would basically derail him off of his, and he would have to find a way to get back onto his little path, because that's all he could essentially do. One of the reasons why he likes video format, the footnote, he doesn't have to reference.
Yeah.
He very seldom makes use of that stuff. Even in his lectures, he isn't one that puts up source material. For one thing, he would have to learn how to spell, which he has a limited ability on. There's a whole bunch of problems on it. But from a methods point of view, the very thing that drives people nuts is attractive. So the least interesting bunch in the world are the signatories to the Discovery Institute Descent from Darwin list, which, by the way, will be my next science book. That's the next topic I'm going to be analyzing, that one. Because what you got are a bunch of people who we are skeptical of natural selection and Darwinism, blah, blah. Why? On what basis? We don't know. And unless they tell us, we don't know. So the next bit are ones that at least will tell you why they're supposedly saying so. If it was the case where they're saying, well, I read Michael Denton's Evolution of Theory and Crisis, and that sure convinced me. Now we have an idea of where they're coming from in terms of secondary citation, and we can put them on a landscape. The ones that are really useful are somebody who's verbose. Luskin is the Mount Olympus here. I have more Casey Luskin posts of anybody. He is diaretically until the time he left the Discovery Institute, I think, to go off to do kind of homeschooling material and doing educational materials, and he's just dropped off the scope. And whether he surfaces again, we'll see. But I don't count him out. But anyway, I have like 400 some odd Casey Luskin postings. 14% of the entire intelligent design literature is Casey Luskin. Top heavy. He was functionally their paleontology department. That's the advantage of seeing a broad field, is that, yes, everybody brings up the Cambrian explosion, and a lot of ones bring up Archaeopteryx and so forth. But if you look at the specialized topics like primate evolution and a lot of these other Casey Luskin, Casey Luskin, Casey Luskin, Casey Luskin. So it was a surefire indicator. He was their point man on this. And therefore, if you take down Casey Luskin, you have just blown a hole in their functional paleontology department, because he's it. You've got a way of targeting your analysis in a way that you wouldn't know if you didn't see the big picture of who does what and all of that stuff.
How many PhD creationists are there?
Oh,
with a degree
actually, quite a few. Quite a few. In fact, virtually everybody that gets on the listings at the ICR has to be an advanced degree. So you have thousands. But if you start whittling it down to relevant ones, it starts looking smaller. Now, the Discovery Institute list are all PhD people. They're, I think, at 1,100 at the moment. I've already started a little bit of a spreadsheet analysis on it. What I was
like engineers, though.
Well, they range. There's, in fact, matter of fact, let me be an idiot here. File, because I had started this quite a few years back, and then I put it on the side, and then I decided that I was going to deal. Where is the old one? I gotta go. If I were screen sharing, you would be even more bored than you are now. As I pull up the spreadsheet and open up the stupid thing, waiting for the open thing to go. Desktop down to tip, and we put that into. Oh no! Wait a minute. That's on my. That's on the desktop. I don't have to worry about that. Discovery Institute signatories. There we go. I haven't opened this in quite a while. There we go. First of all, it's that the list goes over a variety of times. The first one 2007. And what I did, there was the main listing where I was first off noted the fact that none of the names are in alphabetical order of signatories. Why not put them in alphabetical order? Why? Because it would make it easier to understand. So they were intelligently designing it as easy as possible. They want to overwhelm you by sheer volume.
Yeah.
And this is confirmed by the fact that the later listings, if you look where the list gets longer and longer and longer, more and more pages, but the names that are new aren't showing up in the front. They're not showing up in the back. Where are the names being put? That's one of the things that I'm going to be studying. I'm going to find out where they're sprinkling the new names. And I'm pretty certain that they are probably literally sprinkling them through the list in order to pad the size and still make it hard for you to find. Although nowadays, because you can search a PDF, you can at least find out the names. Then I needed to have sections. So under each name, Alan Linton, and his field is bacteriology, and he is listed from the University of Bristol. This doesn't necessarily mean he's at the University of Bristol. In some cases, it might be that's where he got a degree from, because there are apparently some of the people that listed the stuff that way. And then when I then decided to do a breakdown by, let me see, I got microbiology, biochemistry, molecular biology, biology, cell biology, bioengineering, embryology, developmental biology, genetics, agronomy, anthropology, dendrology, ecology, environmental science. These are all the titles they used. And I'm putting in the numbers as I calculate how many of them are under each one of those. And there's going to be 2 down here highlighted because I'm thinking there may not be anybody eventually in them, which at the moment was paleontology and zoology, where there were zeros. There were 9 medical ones so far, and there were 14 chemistry, organic chemistry, and so forth. So this will eventually, when it's all plugged in, will be a complete breakdown, percentages of each group. Then I've got by a discipline, a sub-discipline, I list the actual names so that I can see the actual personages involved and how active they are. Then I got to break down by colleges. For example, a little cluster has started to show up at University of Oklahoma, so I suspect they probably know each other. And then break down by countries, and also a listing of whether they are, any of them are young earth creationists or not. Those I would be, I know at least 3 are on it so far. John Baumgartner, Raymond Bolin, and Dean Kenyon. And there are probably a few others, but my default mode as intelligent design squishies format. Anyway, the upshot from what I can see just as a heuristic, and I know from reading the other material, is that paleontology is not a field that anti-evolutionists do much. Got a couple paleontologists who actually have real live degrees in it who are creationists. And Marcus Ross, he's a newly minted one. Leonard Brand has done some actual paleontology work and gets published in real live geology journals once in a while. And there's a couple other ones that knock around at the Loma Linda Adventist University down there in California that show up in the things. Andrew Snelling publishes occasionally in regular science journals. None of it is their creationist stuff. I mean, that won't cut it. And of course, the creationists will say, you see, scientists, and they will not permit us to print our work. They filter that out. And I'm going, yeah, I'll give you that. But we don't have to depend on them not getting their creationist claptrap published in geology. They self-publish technical journals. So we get to see at Answers in Genesis Research Journal the kinds of work that Andrew Snelling thinks is okie dokie, that if he would want to have that published in Nature or Geology, that's what he would think is okay. Fine, I get to analyze its sources. I get to look at its content and see how it's constructed. And from that point of view, so far, this has not been a game that they do well. When I start looking at how they parse through the data stream, where they have limited stuff, that's another measurement. How many technical papers have anti-evolutionists cited? Nobody knows, because nobody ever counted, but I'm counting. So at the moment, because I'm essentially, as I go through these things, I realized a sudden light bulb went off in 2013, where I realized, okay, I'm taking this creationist stuff and I'm looking up they're in it and finding them, tracking them down, hopefully full text, and then doing background research on the technical literature to find out the context. Whole list of these damn things. If I just keep a listing in a second sheet, really count up all their source base. So at the moment, I plowed through most of the intelligent design literature and most of the recent creationism literature. It'll get a little bit bigger as I go through older stuff, but there's a lot of repetition. Only 3,000 papers.
Hey, RJ, I got a question for you from Trevor Lunn.
Okay.
He was wondering why not try a This Week in Creationist Twits as a theme for a live chat YouTube series.
Oh, I'm okay with that. This week in see, I've already been pointed out where SciStrike says that I should have titling for each one of the things, and that I should put them in a series of clustered program files on my website. So this one is called Jesus' Resurrection Factor Fishing Aftershow. So it's very clear, and it will go in a religion apologetics file when I put that in there. So what was the thing he said again? This week in creationist twittery, or
this week in creationist twits.
Yes, yeah, that can do, because they keep on doing it.
Oh yeah,
they keep tweeting. That would be one where anybody can bring in the material they have, and we can analyze it and run off on that. And all we need to do is to pick a good time and frame on it. So yeah, I'm open for that. On that little title, and we will. Anybody can who follows. Does he follow me on Twitter?
Let's see if he responds there.
Tell him he can put the information in chat over at my website. Is he able to read this stuff here? If he's watching the live feed, I'll put this over here. And there's all these damned comments tab sections at my website. His brother can come in and ask a question or make a comment, and like I check it every day, not anything has happened on the thing. Oh yeah, I think I forgot to update on this. It must have been a little bit of a stream on there. But anyway, you can go look through that if they won't want to do it that way. But on Twitter, they can tweet me. I never block anybody. There may someday come a day when that might happen. But I tell anybody that if you're going to make the trouble of tweeting me, you shouldn't be surprised that I'm going to answer you. And I will be polite and civil. But if you do woo, I will eat you for lunch.
So I can't go waggling my fingers and going woo.
Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, well, that's just entertaining. Yes, yes. But we'll have the fava beans and the Chianti. And I don't bite, but I do say I devour creationists because I'm not thrown off most of arguments that they come up with because they're not terribly original.
Yeah.
Now, once in a while, somebody may toss up something that's brand new that I didn't really spot before, in which case I'll do research on it. And I'm always popping up on that stuff. And so by following the material, because everything is in a unified data stream for me, information now becomes a tighter network. That means my defense wall gets stronger and stronger and stronger, which everybody is kind of running amok as individual stuff, writing an individual little blog post where they may have an individual little paper in it, and then they don't really think about it ever again, and they have to remember where they got back to it. Following me on Twitter, I will dump citations on people where appropriate. And oh, so I'm looking at the comments over here. Yes, Brian said, I figure James down at ongoing regular content. Trevor Long, yeah, now we're seeing the thing. And did my, maybe it's taken a while to hit. Oh, there it is up above. Yeah, tortucanwordpress.com. Anybody can go over on that one. And you'll find links to all the books and all the other crap on that, and the GoFundMe and everything else. Desperate Can Rattle, blah, blah, blah. But I think it would be delightful if we can find a stage. Creationists might actually come into the discussion as well and defend their position, provided they're polite. There are some of them, like that little red nitwit that was on one of the after shows that Steve McRae had, that is just an annoying jerk. And you can't get a word in endways on him. That's a different kind. But a lot of creationists they're serious. They really think they've got the sciencey stuff. They can be approached in a rigorous way that can be polite without getting stuffed on things. And the easiest thing to get flustered on is when you get blindsided. So if you know the data stream, you're just listening to them say the stuff you've heard and read 15,000 times, and then you're just framing in your sentence the kind of response you want to make, that you will drop the anvil on them as soon as they reach a period. Thank you. And that's the approach you want to do. I would have liked to have seen a bit more with Kent Hovind, both with King Crocoduck and with Ludlow, at times when there were cases where Kent was simply repeating tropes he has done a long time before, and you could remind people of that. Boy, that's a song and dance you've been doing for a long time, and it's been something where we've been trying to see you document that. And that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, that's, yeah. Or if they bring up Nebraska Man, can Piltdown be far behind? You know, it's just ubiquitous. And you know where they got it from. They got it from a damn quote mine. They got it from a creationist website. They won't have got it from an intelligent design source usually, because they don't bother about that. No, it's a young earth creationist one. So the very structure of their argument is filtering things. If they're starting to shoot their mouth off, there's one lady on Sally Forth. She is not a creationist. No, no, no. Well, I'm terribly sorry, but when you start talking about the problems of radiometric dating and the biblical flood, you're sure sounding like a creationist. You're doing a really Jim Bang impression of one. So don't give me that bullshit. I'm afraid I know your material better. You get a very different dynamic. with somebody. I really haven't bumped into all that many intelligent design folk or intelligent design people willing to respond on stuff. Ross has asked me to go on his little video show, I think in October, he said. He must have a really long waiting list. And I constantly compliment Ross when I will make a comment on some little gee whiz posting he puts up, and I'll drop a technical paper that says, oh, here's the evolutionary context of it. And he'll kind of respond a little bit here and there. And I always compliment him on it. I say, you are a standout character. You're very rare in the anti-evolution biz of somebody who will actually respond and engage. And I give you props for that, because that takes a level of decency and character, and also confidence in your position. In this case, he's kind of a self-referential fuddlehead on too many things. And so he makes a relatively weak debater. And he tends to be an incestuous citer, where he cites his own stuff and citing his own stuff, and he kind of augers himself into holes too often. But he's a pleasant one, and it's kind of fun to deal with. And Hoving, of course, it's the Lion's Den. Oh, somebody's got you mused at a comment from somebody?
Yeah, well, first off, Trevor said he doesn't do Twitter, but he's going to be following you. And Brian Stevens said, I tried radiographic dating, but she didn't like my radio or the graph paper coasters. What did I do wrong?
What did I do wrong? I love that, Brian. That's great. Yeah, I'm at RJ Downey. How boring I am on Twitter. Also, you'll see my stupid mug. I have the same picture all over the place, so everybody can tell. Yeah, I love that. She didn't like my radio or the graph paper coasters. What did I do wrong? Yeah, the radiometric dating is one of those litmus tests. Global flood is almost a litmus test, because it's old Earth creationists are much less likely to step in that area. Issues are ones that will pop up either with your old Earth creationists or intelligent designer, or a young Earth creationist. Intelligent designers kind of steer clear of it. And systematics, taxonomy issues, and so pathetic, because intelligent designers don't do systematics, and old Earth creationists don't do systematics, and young Earth creationists only do baraminology, and most creationists don't read baraminology. So there's no playing field to play on. Jimmy wants to play. He wants to know how to parse your way through the synapsids. And so it's an odd little field for things. Thermodynamics is the one squishy zone, which most people who bring up thermodynamics arguments are riffing off of young Earth creationists and dated young Earth creationism, because this is really kind of a passe argument in a lot of young Earth creationist apologetics these days. But Granville Sewell over in Intelligent Design Land, who's pushing this thermodynamic argument, not quite as thoroughly as young Earth creationists do, but it means that merely mentioning the second law doesn't necessarily peg them as a young Earth creationist automatically anymore. So I have to kind of probe to find out where they're doing. And if they start linking to answers in Genesis, then I go, phew, they're normal. They're a typical demographic. Thank you very much.
One of the roads that I kind of like to go down that I don't see a lot of people doing is the fact that creationists they'll make predictions. So they'll say, you know, how did the marsupials of Australia get to the Middle East and back? Well, there was land bridge. Yeah. Well, okay, that's great. That's a scientific prediction. So where are the scientists launching their little robot submarines with their clipboards trying to find evidence? Where are the labs? There's no creationist labs. There's no creationists aren't doing science, because if they did science, then they might disprove some of the things they'd have to say. Then they'd have to stop saying it.
Carl Baugh's got his little experiments going on to make a Dimetrodon dinosaur, and he's managed to produce some mutant fruit flies. And that.
But they're not testing the things that they're saying.
Well, testing, yeah, that's something that they don't do, because remember, all of their research is ordained with a conclusion. They already know where they must arrive, and they can never not arrive there. This is a non-negotiable conceptually in their brains. So what you've got are the equivalent of how do Curlian photography when they're trying to hunt up ghosts or something like that. You've got a particular kind of self-referential methodology that when you start looking at the fiddly bits, it starts disintegrating. But the rate group, they sort of do some stuff, but remember, they can't afford to buy a radiocarbon dating system. They can't have buy the equipment to do this stuff.
They have the resources, don't they?
Well, a little bit, but most of the stuff,
like
they like to send out labs as well.
Donated.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, Brian's terrible. Sorry.
Oh, you got. Oh, another one. My biggest question becomes, why would your date have time to use your dictaphone? Now, Brian, now, some of us are old farts. We have old, I love it, like, I watch the old, with Sven Gulli on MeTV. He's got this hilarious show where they show old horror movies, and he's got some little comedy routines and all that in there. And he's an old fart like me. So he will often be tossing off a lot of oblique references, and a lot of the movies are from the 40s and 50s, so there's a lot of references in there that he's riffing off of from a personal experience, and then he'll have to say,
well, I'm going to go because I'm feeling like I'm overheating. I'm by the window, and I don't handle the heat very well.
We've been at it for a while. There's quite a few stuck into it. In fact, I'll have to actually gear shift and go on to like get some food and a few other things, and then gear up for Size Strike's stuff tonight.
Oh,
it is Friday, isn't it?
Oh, cool!
Yep,
and I'm home! Yay!
Yes, going, I'm sure, after yet another terribly innovative flat earther, and like to show up on that and do the honor of the thing. But yeah, glad to have you on there. I'll keep a little feed on things. I will actually be going and zapping up my food on there. Yeah, 4 hours to go, BJ.
Cool.
The neat thing.
Yeah, I watch you like every time I get a chance, because it's like, you just have so much knowledge in there, that
absolutely.
I've been accumulating it a lot. And I've got good retentive memory. I learned, in effect, what I realized I was doing after the fact, I'm creating a memory palace. Down and interconnecting information so that I can pull it up with a facility that makes me sound smarter than I actually am. And I've been at it a long time. Yeah.
Did you read a book about memory?
I've seen material lecturing on it. There was some stuff that's been done on NPR that goes into the point, and usually people will do it just as a way of improving their memory for memorizing the number of cards in a card deck. And I go, I don't want to memorize cards in a card deck. It's totally uninteresting to me. But I would be doing. I'd started to write a story that I eventually let slide. It was a whole epic. That lives like 100 years old, and all the things that happened. So it's like upstairs, downstairs, and all that Forsyth saga all lumped up together. And I realized that as I was building up all the history of the period from the 1860s all the way up to the 1970s, that in effect I was creating this giant memory palace where the Halsey family was my history. I remember what was going on during the Harrison administration because of what Whitten did during the Harrison administration.
Oh, wow.
So now I can remember what was happening in the Harrison administration without even bothering about the fact that this was Whitten. I can remember what was going on in the politics because it's now an external memory palace. And I kept up with it. It turned out there was a bunch of stuff in there I was able to make use of as well for the Phileas Fogg novels because it overlapped some of the same period. So when I wanted to stick in stuff about the Centennial Exhibition from 1876 in the new book, I just pulled a lot of the research I had done stuff because I had to have the monorail in there. There was a monorail at the Philadelphia World's Fair in 1876.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember hearing about that.
Cost 3 cents.
Yeah, the best I'm doing is working on illustrations for a children's coloring book that I think I'm going to be titling it Birds Are Dinosaurs Too. And some of the illustrations will be humorous and other ones are going to be a little more serious. But yeah, I got
Someday I
inspired
may
by
have to
a
have,
kid I
I
work
would
with.
like to have an illustrated version of the Phileas Fogg novels. And boy, I could use an illustrator to do those. And I have a whole slew of pictures,
Oh,
but I couldn't do because I didn't have the rights to them. So I just skipped because it was going to be an illustrated version of Phileas Fogg, because I actually have the railroad station in Calcutta in the 1860s, and I actually have the various stations and railroad lines and what Hong Kong looked like. I was gobsmacked at what Hong Kong looked like in 1872. It was all Mediterranean architecture. I wasn't expecting that. And then it all changed. The city rebuilt into Beaux-Arts by the 1890s, so almost nothing of the old city exists for you to actually look at. So that it'd be fun to have an illustrator to do the stuff.
I'd be willing to do it.
Yeah. Well,
You
someday I can email you the illustrated version, the PDF of the book that you will not share with anyone without permission, because I'd rather them buy the book.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
My email, I'll put my email up on the screen there, because this is a
Okay.
public thing that I made notice of before, and I don't care if somebody wants to spam me there, I'll spam back. AOL.com, isn't that pathetic? But anyway, I've got an illustrated version of it, a pile up of pictures, but obviously no pictures of the characters, no pictures of the Deimos and the Kestrel and the Nautilus, although I used actually some stuff from the Disney Nautilus, which of course I couldn't get the rights to that, yuck.
Yeah.
And then of course in Chicago that I can't tell anybody about without it being spoiler alert. But nevertheless, this would all be matters that I would love to have. Somebody theoretically could do drawings in a consistent style where they would make use of the photographs as core information and others. So everything would all be in the same format and integrated them with the text. Because I think very visually, and I did the story basically as a movie in the brain. And then when I suddenly thought, do a novelization of this, I can write like Jules Verne. And so I actually wrote the novel, and then a friend of mine said, well, you've got ways of doing self-publishing. And so he pushed me onto lulu.com, which is basically an ebook format. And that's when I did the first version. CreateSpace, which is Amazon's kick butt, where you can get the fancy covers all at no cost, and they handle all of the word processor files easily and all that stuff. And so it was way better in terms of that. And then I was like a kid in the candy store, and I could go, I could do slam dunk, I could do slam dunk.
Well,
So
you'll get an email from a very convoluted German name. That's me. I just sent it.
Und meine kleine schwarze Sicherheitsnadel sind sehr ruhig und feit. That's my instant gibberish Hitler speech. But anyway, then I'll send you that. You'll have the Phileas Fogg novel in the rare and fabulous illustrated version.
Oh, that would,
Pictures.
I think that'd be fun. I do have 2 craft shows and 3 face painting events I'm doing before November hits. And so I got to get that out of the way, and 2 commissions that I'm working on right now. So it should be about December or January that things will clear up a bit, that I can start doing some drawings.
Well, you and I are both the ones. We're scraping along as best we can under the circumstances.
Exactly.
And going literally one day at a time. And
Yep.
trying to make a new life for yourself, because what you're trying to do, you really have a love for. And
Yeah.
I may sink
And
like
I have a lot of
but I'm
physical
going down
issues. I can't lift patients anymore, so I got to do something else.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah. And, what a time to do a midlife crisis at 65. I can't even afford to go on Medicare for my Social Security. I'm too tight of a budget. But I'm fabulously healthy. I come from a long line of fabulously healthy people. I literally never had a flu shot because I've never had the flu.
Yeah, I haven't been that lucky. So.
Yeah.
But I'm going to let
Yeah,
you guys
I
go. I got to log off. So.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
think
bye.
so.
Auf Wiedersehen.
I believe I talk the microorganisms to death. That's why they don't stick around.
You'd be a natural at
seriously-
podcasting or radio.
Well, I've done theater back in college. I love doing that. And I have kind of a fairly fast improvisational wit, although not lightning fast. I would screw up if I were on at midnight. Boy, those people are sharp. I love that show. And of course, I'm not nearly hip enough. Even though Hardwick is 40-something, I mean, he's at least got his pulse on the stuff. But good Lord, I'm a baby boomer baby that goes back from when televisions had rotary dials on them. So I'm way too before that.
I remember this when I was a kid. I think I'm going to wrap up here too, but
so this has gone on. I'll actually stop the broadcast. Yes, I can stop a broadcast. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all you have been following along here. I think hopefully I didn't bore the tears out of everybody. We had some fun chat.
Not at all. In fact, it was great to meet you because I'm rapidly becoming a big fan of yours. I like what you're doing, so keep doing it.
I'll can as long as I can. Help me at the GoFundMe and the Patreon.
Okay.
Okay, we are now concluding this day's Jesus' Resurrection Fact or Fiction after show, where we discussed a bunch beyond just that. And I'll be doing more of these on my channel, so keep an eye out. For those of you who know where my main channel is, that's going to be me. And I'm open to suggestions where anybody comes up. We're going to want to do a This Week in Creationist Twit stuff in due course, where we can do stuff on that. So it'll be kind of an improv theater as catch can interesting issues. How does that sound? Anyway, anybody on Twitter, tweet me, give me reactions, come to the website and www.tortucan.wordpress.com. Say hi and what you think about stuff. And I guess I should wrap this up, otherwise I won't be able to stop the damn broadcast. Au revoir.